All right, we're still having some people sneak in here, but we are going to go ahead and get started so that we can stay on our schedule. Welcome to the 12th Annual E3 Conference. This conference is dedicated to educating, empowering, and energizing the Colorado and Wyoming Parkinson's communities. I'm Jody Brown. I'm the CEO of Parkinson Association of the Rockies, and I'm so happy to be with you all here today. Thank you for joining us this morning and supporting both PAR and the Parkinson's community. It is because of your drive to live well and your support that we can provide the free programs and services necessary to thrive with Parkinson's. I'd like to thank our partners for their sponsorship of this wonderful event. A special thanks to our presenting sponsors, Supernus Pharmaceuticals, our program sponsors, Advent Health, Boston Scientific, Encompass Rehabilitation Hospital of Littleton, Health One Swedish Medical Center, Medtronic, and Reunion Rehabilitation Hospital of Inverness. I'd also like to thank all of our exhibitors for their support and for coming out today to provide resources and to answer your questions. Please don't hesitate to go chat with them. You will be able to visit with them again in the atrium during lunch, which starts around 12:10. We will also have energizer breaks throughout the day to keep you moving, get you out of your seat a little bit, and you might even find a new type of exercise class that you would like to attend. So I always get the fun job of the housekeeping items. So for lunch, the lunch break will begin at 12:10 today, and box lunches will be available in the atrium. At the registration table, if you requested assistance with your lunch, you should have received an orange ticket. So put that orange ticket in front of you, and one of our volunteers will assist you and get your lunch for you. Parking is free to all of our participants, so if you parked either on the surface lot or in the garage, they're both available and free for parking. The gate will open in the parking garage starting at 1:30 p.m. If for some reason you have to leave before that, you'll have to push the intercom button and they'll lift the gate for you. Programs at your table should also have an evaluation form and any handouts provided by the speakers. At the end of the conference, please make sure you fill out the evaluations, and I will remind you again, and return them to the registration table or leave them on the table and we'll get them. The bathrooms are located just out to the right of the conference room. There are additional bathrooms downstairs if you need them. We really pack this conference tightly, so we do not work in bathroom breaks, so take them as needed, and then we'll because we won't take a break again until lunch. That all went together. So with that, we are going to get started, and I'm so excited to introduce our keynote speaker, Dr. Ray Dorsey. He is the David M. Levy Professor of Neurology at the University of Rochester and is working to identify and eliminate the root causes of Parkinson's disease. His research on brain diseases and digital health has been published in leading academic journals and featured in multiple news outlets. In 2020, Ray and his colleagues wrote Ending Parkinson's Disease, a book that provides a prescription for ending the world's fastest growing brain disease. Dr. Dorsey previously directed the Movement Disorders Division in Neurology Telemedicine at Johns Hopkins and worked as a consultant for McKinsey & Company. In 2015, the White House recognized him as a champion for change for Parkinson's disease. He is a knowledgeable advocator and educator, and we are so lucky to have him with us today. Please give a giant welcome to our opening speaker, Dr. Ray Dorsey.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Jody, for that kind introduction. Thank you very much to the Parkinson's Association of the Rockies for organizing such a wonderful event, and thank you to the sponsors for helping support it. I'm going to tell you that Parkinson's disease, one of the world's fastest growing brain diseases, is preventable. Parkinson's disease is a preventable disease. And why does that matter? I'll give you 3 reasons. First, if you have Parkinson's disease, you probably want to know how to slow the rate of progression. If you knew what was causing the disease, you'd probably want to avoid those environmental factors so that you could slow it. Just like if you were a smoker and you had lung cancer, what's the first thing the doctor's going to tell you to do? Stop smoking. But when you were told that you had Parkinson's disease, did anyone tell you to stop getting exposed to the chemicals that might have been causing your disease in the first place? Second, many of you are looking for better treatments or a cure. I submit to you that you can't cure a disease medically until you know its cause. You can't cure a disease medically until you know its cause. I'll give you an example. How many of you remember stomach ulcers? People remember stomach ulcers? Yeah. What do they think stomach ulcers were due to? Stress. What did they tell you to do? Just quit your job, get less stressful. They even did radical surgeries. Did any of that work? No. What causes stomach ulcers? Bacteria. So these two scientists, doctors, were saying this is what causes stomach ulcers. It's bacteria. They were ridiculed, discredited, until one of them actually swallowed a solution of the bacteria and gave himself the stomach ulcers, and then he took an antibiotic, and then he was cured. Third reason that you should care about that Parkinson's is preventable is you probably don't want your kids or future generations to get the disease. So that's why we're going to talk to you about why Parkinson's is preventable. So central thesis is that Parkinson's is a man-made disease. Before Dr. Parkinson described it in 1817 in London, it was extraordinarily rare. Second, that Parkinson's is rising and preventable. And third, that we can create, and I would indeed say we have an obligation to create a world without Parkinson's disease. So in 1962, Rachel Carson launched the environmental movement with her book, Silent Spring. And she didn't argue against the use of pesticides, which, like DDT, were instrumental in preventing millions of people from getting malaria during World War II. She argued against the indiscriminate and widespread use of pesticides. And she was concerned that the widespread use of pesticides would lead to new diseases. And this is what she wrote. The farmers spoke of much illness among their families. In the town, the doctor had become more and more puzzled by new kinds of sickness appearing among their patients. Now, she wasn't necessarily thinking of Parkinson's disease unless she was really brilliant, but I think she was exactly right. And that these chemicals are fueling the rise of Parkinson's. Now, many of you have been told that Parkinson's disease is due to genetics. I'll ask you, how many of you carry a genetic cause for Parkinson's disease? How many of you do not carry a genetic cause for Parkinson's disease? So Parkinson's disease turns out to be among the least heritable of all major medical conditions. Parkinson's disease is among the least heritable of all major medical conditions. It's not my opinion. This is from a paper in Nature Review Genetics, which looks at the heritability of diseases, and some diseases are really, really heritable. I spent 10 years caring for people with Huntington's disease. I don't think I said the word environment once because Huntington's disease is due to a single genetic mutation that's passed on from generation to generation. And other diseases like type 1 diabetes, schizophrenia, have a high heritability. They run commonly in families. But only about 15% of people with Parkinson's disease have a family history of the disease. We've known this for 100 years. And we know that only about 15% of people carry a genetic risk factor for the disease. And Parkinson's disease, you can see, is among the least heritable diseases. So if it's not genetics, then it's the environment. And so what are the three major causes of Parkinson's disease in the environment in the United States? And I think it varies by region. I think it's one, certain pesticides, including a pesticide called paraquat. Second one is a dry cleaning chemical called trichloroethylene. How many people have heard of trichloroethylene? All right, wow, good. All right, I think it's the most important cause of Parkinson's disease in the United States, and I'm going to tell you why. And then third is outdoor air pollution. I'll start with paraquat. So I was speaking to a fellow neurologist before we were speaking today, and he said in 1986 he was a medical student and he was investigating the environmental causes of Parkinson's disease, writing a review, because in 1983 a contaminant in a street form of heroin called MPTP was causing Parkinson's, not in older individuals, but in young individuals, and not happening over many months or years, but happening acutely. And that chemical called MPTP bears a striking resemblance to the pesticide paraquat. If you look at their chemical structures, they're nearly identical. Dr. Kimberly Paul is going to tell you a lot more about the dangers of paraquat today. But it's considered the most toxic weed killer ever created. It kills the weeds that Roundup doesn't. It's been used to commit homicide and suicide. It's associated with a 150% increased risk of Parkinson's disease, 150% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. It's so toxic that China and over 50 other countries have banned it, but the United States has not. In fact, it's sprayed on corn, cotton, in vineyards probably today, probably a little bit in Colorado, certainly in upstate New York where I live, and certainly in Los Angeles where Dr. Paul lives. And it turns out that lots of research Dr. Paul is going to describe to you has linked paraquat in human studies and in animal studies. One of my colleagues, Dr. Debbie Kora-Schlechta, did research in the 1990s showing that when you feed paraquat to laboratory animals, they develop both the clinical features, they develop slow movements, and pathological features of the disease. When you look at their brain, they look like they have Parkinson's. It turns out that all of this information is dwarfed by what the manufacturer knew about its own product. At least according to the reporting from The Guardian, they looked at legal documents that the chemical company has submitted in lawsuits because many farmers, especially from California, have sued the company because they used paraquat and then developed Parkinson's disease. And and Carrie Gilliam and her colleagues reviewed this literature and showed some disturbing findings. If you were exposed to pesticides, you should read this. Just Google Guardian and paraquat. And it turns out that for over 50 years, the chemical company knew about the dangers of its own product. In the 1960s, they fed paraquat to mice, to rats, and to rabbits, and they all developed the clinical features of Parkinson's disease, including tremor. So the company knew for 30 years before academic scientists that their product, when exposed to animals in their own settings, produced the clinical features of Parkinson's disease. All this was conducted before I was born. In 1968, poisoning deaths and suicides due to paraquat rose. In 1974, regulators were concerned that workers, quote, might inadvertently lick small quantities of paraquat residue off their lips or inhale paraquat mist. Rumors circulate that some in the EPA were favoring banning of paraquat. 50 years later, they have yet to do so. In 1976, 4 years after I was born, a brain autopsy from a farm worker showed degenerative changes in the cells of the substantia nigra, which many of you know is exactly what you see in Parkinson's disease. In 1985, Andre Barbeau, a neurologist, Canadian neurologist, looked at the rates of Parkinson's disease in rural parts of Canada and pesticide use. And he found a near perfect correlation between the amount of pesticide use in different rural parts of Canada and rates of Parkinson's disease. Correlation is measured on a scale that goes from 0 to 1, and he found a 0.967 correlation. The company was really concerned about this study. They warned that paraquat could become a huge legal liability like asbestos, and said that Parkinson's could go on for decades. And I think they were right. So I sent this article to my friend who's an English professor at the Rochester Institute of Technology, and he goes, Ray, this is agnotology. And probably like many, if not all of you, I was like, what in the world is agnotology? Well, he goes, Ray, science is the production of knowledge, ideally for the public's good. Agnotology is a deliberate production of ignorance, often for commercial gain. And this is not a new tactic. This was widely used in the tobacco industry, who even had a term for it, a slogan internally, which was doubt is our product. We're not trying to show you that smoking is good for you, although they used to do that with ads depicting doctors smoking cigarettes. They would just say, we're not sure, we need more evidence, it's not been proven. And that same thing has been applied to the opioid pandemic. It's being applied to social media companies, as many of you have read. And if it's being applied to paraquat and Parkinson's disease, we should be asking to what other chemicals is it being applied to related to Parkinson's disease, and for what other conditions. Which brings me to trichloroethylene. So trichloroethylene is a really, really simple molecule. Many of you know that water, H2O, is made up of 3 atoms. Trichloroethylene is made up of a whopping 6. I carry it with me everywhere I go. 2 carbon atoms in black, 1 hydrogen atom in white, and then 3 chlorine atoms in blue, hence its name, trichloroethylene. It's got a cousin that has probably very similar, if not the same toxicity with respect to Parkinson's disease. It's called perchloroethylene. Instead of having 3 chlorine atoms, it has 4 chlorine atoms. Perchloroethylene is widely used in dry cleaning. It's probably used and dry cleaners was widely most common used dry cleaner in the United States. I'll tell you right now, I would avoid dry cleaning, and I would not use a dry cleaner that uses perchloroethylene. There are green dry cleaners that usually have a green leaf that use different chemicals. Now, these chemicals were widely used in commercial products and industrial products and in the military. In the 1970s, 600 million pounds of TCE, 2 pounds per American, were produced. It was in typewriter correction fluid. It was in your decaffeinated coffee. It was in your carpet cleaner. It was in your gun cleaner. Over 10 million Americans worked with TCE, and if you worked in aircraft jet engine mechanic, if you were a computer specialist, if you worked in Silicon Valley, if you cleaned off silicon wafers, if you were an embalmer, if you were an oil processor, if you were a painter or a printer, if you were a shoemaker or a taxidermist, a weapons specialist, or a varnish worker, you quite possibly could have been exposed to trichloroethylene. It also has a wide range of commercial uses and industry uses. It was so widely used that doctors even used it as an anesthetic agent for pregnant women. This is from Dr. Charles Flowers writing in the American Journal of Obstetrics and Gynecology in 1956, and he said, and I quote, "Trilene or trichloroethylene is a potent analgesic drug. Its margin of safety and ease of administration will ultimately make it a standard agent on all delivery floors. Trilene's wide variety of uses will probably allow almost every obstetrician to find a place for it in his obstetrical practice." It was even used that people could self-administer it. Midwives could do it. You could hold the canister yourself and give it to yourself until you would pass out. If any of you used it, I would love to hear your story. There's even some suggestion, although no one's looked at the acute effects on pregnant women, the chronic effects of TC is associated with miscarriages, low birth weight babies, congenital heart disease, and a wide range of other congenital abnormalities. And there's one study that suggested that anesthesiologists might have had increased rates of Parkinson's disease themselves. TC is associated with a 500% increased risk of Parkinson's disease, a 500% increased risk of Parkinson's disease. Almost nothing in science is associated with that. This is from a small twin study done by my colleagues, Dr. Caroline Tanner and Sam Goldman, now at University of California, San Francisco. They asked twins from World War II if they had hobby or occupational exposure to TCE, and then looked and see who had Parkinson's disease. Those who had hobby or occupational exposure to the chemical had a 500%, six-fold increased risk of developing Parkinson's. Like smoking cigarettes, you don't get exposed to the chemical and develop the disease the next day. The lag time between the exposure and the diagnosis in this study was somewhere between 10 to 40 years, which makes it really, really, really difficult to prove that something that you were exposed to in the past is causing a disease many years later. So when you do find that association, you better sit up and pay attention, because you can imagine the science of doing that is difficult. They said because of the widespread use that the potential public health implications are substantial. Now, if you don't care about Parkinson's disease, you should care about cancer. TC is known to cause cancer. It's not my opinion. It's the opinion of the World Health Organization, the opinion of the Department of Health and Human Services, and the opinion of the Environmental Protection Agency, which says it's carcinogenic in humans by all routes of exposure. Many cancers are linked to it: non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, prostate cancer, multiple myeloma, renal cancer, and kids' leukemia, and I also think brain cancer. As many of you know, rates of cancer in the United States among Americans for people under 50 are rising. Cancer rates among Americans under 50 is rising, and people don't know why. Clearly, it can't be aging because it's under 50. It's not really screening, because most cancer screening is not done to 50. I think, therefore, it's the environment, and this is all happening in the setting of declining smoking rates. So you have cancer rates going up under 50 and smoking rates going down. It begs the question of what's causing these cancers. As many of you know, trichloroethylene contaminated Camp Lejeune. How many of you know about Camp Lejeune? Yes. So Camp Lejeune is a Marine base in North Carolina, was contaminated with trichloroethylene in its drinking water from 1953 to 1987. For the latter years, the Marine Corps knew about the contamination and did nothing. The Marine Corps knew about the contamination, knowingly exposing the best and brightest of Americans, to cancer-causing chemicals in their drinking water and did nothing. They even refused to notify the Marines who served there of the exposure after the fact until Congress passed a law forcing them to do so. Again, think about agnotology, the deliberate production of ignorance. So Dr. Sam Goldman and Caroline Tanner at UCSF investigated this cohort of Marines who served at Camp Lejeune and compared them to Marines and other service members who served at a less polluted base called Camp Pendleton in California. And they found that the Marines who served at Camp Lejeune had a 70% increased risk of developing Parkinson's disease, a 70% increased risk. Now, the Marines who were exposed were by definition healthy. They were young, they were only 20 years old, and they're only there for a short period of time. Those of you who have served, thank you. Know that you're only at a base for a short period of time, in this case, just over 2 years. Yet 34 years later, a 70% increased risk of Parkinson's, and this cohort is still young. The average age is just under 60. So you say to yourself, well, I wasn't a Marine at Camp Lejeune, I wasn't a painter, a printer, or an embalmer. TCE could not have affected me, and to that I would say, unfortunately, you're wrong. Because up to 30% of groundwater in the United States is contaminated with trichloroethylene. Sometimes it's an honest leak from a tank or an underground sewer line. Sometimes companies, dry cleaners, just dump the chemical into the ground, and it percolates through the soil and then gets into the groundwater, which is 15 to 50 feet below the surface, depending on where you live. Once it gets into the groundwater, it forms a concentrated pocket called a plume that can then migrate with the groundwater and travel a mile or more. And because TCE is readily volatile, remember it was used as an anesthetic agent, it, like radon, can evaporate from the soil and water and enter people's homes, schools, and workplaces undetected. And these plumes are everywhere. If you lived on Long Island, you were possibly exposed to one of the largest known plumes in the United States. This is from a military contractor that was using trichloroethylene to degrease the metal. The plume on Long Island in the Bethpage area is a significant threat to the public health or the environment and continues to move south about 1 mile per day. If you live, work, or your children go to a school in a school or house that's above that plume, you could be having TCE be evaporating into your home and not even know it. It's not just a problem in Long Island, it's a problem in Denver. So this is Lowry Air Force Base. Anyone know about Lowry Air Force Base? So everyone knows about Lowry Air Force Base. You guys are well-educated, well-read. And evidently, Lowry Air Force Base used TCE to clean airplane engines, which formed an underground plume emanating from the base. You can see the picture of the plume from the Denver Post. Concentrations are at 200 to 300 parts per billion, which is 40 times what the state of Colorado deems to be safe. So there are cancer-causing chemicals in this plume at levels that are 40 times that deemed to be safe. At least 15 homes have been reported to have TCE in their indoor air, and it's also at the former Stapleton Airport. You don't need to be in Long Island, you don't need to be in Denver, you can be in Rochester, New York, where I live, and this is a suburban location that I used to drive past almost every day. It's 5 to 10 minutes from my home. It's a nice looking office park right near Pittsford Wegmans, if you guys know, Rochester's home to the Wegmans grocery store. And it turned out there used to be a metal plating facility from 1956 to 1979 that operated there. It was then bought by another business which was looking to do some expansion. As part of that, they had to do environmental inspections. Unbeknownst to them, they found that there was TCE in the groundwater in the soil. They found the concentrations at 130,000 parts per billion. I told you that in Denver, maybe I'll go back. In Denver, it was 200 to 300 parts per billion. In Rochester, New York, it's 130,000. This is even more contaminated than Camp Lejeune, at least according to the records that I've seen. So we have in suburban Rochester, New York, a site that's more contaminated than Camp Lejeune. It turned out that the indoor air in this building was tested in 2013, 50 years after the metal fabrication plant had become operational, and they found TCE throughout the building. And the nice thing is that you can readily remediate this by just putting essentially a radon remediation system that sucks the air from underneath the foundation of a home or building and then vents it above, and the indoor air in the building is currently safe. Finally, air pollution. So what was Dr. Parkinson describing in 1817? Well, he said, I'm describing something new, something that has not been described in the medical literature, something that's not been classified in it. And synthetic man-made pesticides weren't really created until World War II. As I mentioned, there are natural occurring pesticides that are linked to the disease. And trichloroethylene, although created in 1864, wasn't widely used commercially until 1920. So what was Dr. Parkinson, what was causing the Parkinson's disease in the people that he was watching walking the streets of London? I think it might have been air pollution. Many of you know that when you see smog in Los Angeles or in Denver, you're seeing little pieces of dirt and soot in the air. And those little pieces of dirt and soot, most of them we cough out or sneeze out. But some are so small, 1/30th the width of my hair, that they can be inhaled, pass through the nerve responsible for smell, and go back to the smell centers of our brain. And from there, those little pieces of particulate matter are often carrying hitchhikers. And these hitchhikers are often toxic metals, lead from leaded gasoline, iron from brakes, platinum from catalytic converters that we know are toxic to brain cells. And if you think about Parkinson's disease, many of you know that the pathology of the disease and the vast majority of people begins in the smell center of the brain, and many of you know one of the earliest features of Parkinson's disease is loss of smell. A recent study by our colleagues in neurology from just last year showed that high levels of air pollution are associated with high rates of Parkinson's disease in the United States. In red, you can see areas of the country that have high levels of air pollution and high levels of Parkinson's disease. And in blue, Colorado being among them, low rates of Parkinson's disease and low levels of air pollution. It turns out that these chemicals, which are either inhaled or ingested, could very well fit in with a new model of the disease by Dr. Per Borghammer and his colleagues, suggesting that Parkinson's disease either has a body-first form, in which it begins in the gut, and then the misfolded protein then spreads up a nerve called the vagus nerve, and then up through ascending upwards, causing first constipation, sleep disturbances, then Parkinsonism, slowed movements, and then dementia. Or it could begin with inhalation of a toxicant like paraquat, like trichloroethylene, and get pathology beginning in the smell centers of our brain, usually on one side, and then spreading back toward the substantia nigra, and then later spreading down the brainstem, and later spreading into both hemispheres. And so this is a model of how these toxicants might be contributing to Parkinson's. So Parkinson's is rising. I don't need to tell this audience that Parkinson's is one of the fastest growing brain diseases in the world. 200 years after Dr. Parkinson described 6 people with the disease, the global burden of disease estimated that 6 million had the disease. So you go from 6 to 6 million in 200 years. It can't be genetics. It's unlikely to be longevity alone. It's got to be environment. Indeed, rates of Parkinson's disease are highest in the industrialized world, like the US and Canada, lowest in the least industrialized worlds like sub-Saharan Africa, and growing most rapidly in countries undergoing rapid industrialization like China and India. There are some great silver linings to this. There's only one high-quality study that I've seen that's shown that the rate of Parkinson's disease is going down. And that was in this city called Rotterdam in the Netherlands, a port city in the Netherlands, in which they found between 1990 and 2011 a 60% decrease in the number of new cases of Parkinson's. They didn't know why, so I went backwards and looked at my 3 favorite or least favorite environmental causes of the disease and found substantial reductions in all 3 of these. This is not the way you do science. Ideally, you follow reductions and then see what happens in the future, but this is what I had. Turned out that levels of pesticides, including DDT and many pesticides that dissolve in the fat, dropped in human fatty tissue between 75 and 90% in the decades before this decline. Turned out that TCE levels in 1981 in the Netherlands were the lowest in all of Europe. And it turned out that air pollution in the Netherlands had dropped between 50 to 90% in the decades before that. And then you find a 60% decrease and the number of new cases of the disease. So this suggests that we could create a world where Parkinson's is increasingly rare. But we really need to act, and we are beneficiaries of many actions of prior generations. Many of you realize that polio used to close down swimming pools and community centers until a March of Dimes raised money for it. 17 years after the March of Dimes was developed, Jonas Salk announced in Pittsburgh that he had developed a vaccine that works for the disease. Today, we live in a world largely free of polio. There are no polio associations of the Rockies. There are no polio treatment centers. There are no polio experts, at least in the United States. Polio is on the verge of becoming extinct. In 1980, a 13-year-old girl was walking and struck by a drunk driver, literally knocked out of her shoes and killed. The person who struck her was a drunk driver. In 1980, drinking and driving was legal in certain states in the country. Her mother, Candace Leitner, said it's the only socially acceptable form of homicide. 4 days after her daughter was killed, she begins lobbying a California legislator. Every day for a year, she went to Governor Jerry Brown's office and formed a group called Mothers Against Drunk Driving. 8 years after this accident, drinking and driving is illegal in all 50 states in the country. The blood alcohol level is dropped to 0.008, and the drinking age is raised from 18 to 21. Every year since 1988, 10,000 fewer children and adults are killed in drunk driving accidents because of the actions of Candace Leitner and her peers. 10,000 fewer deaths of children, 10,000 schools not torn apart, 10,000 communities not destroyed, 10,000 families not suffering because of the actions of an ordinary woman. In 1987, HIV is running rampant throughout the country. There's no federal response to the disease. Some doctors and hospitals refuse to care for people with the disease. Individuals are blamed for a disease that is killing them. In that setting, Larry Kramer and his colleagues formed an organization called ACT UP. ACT UP had a motto that silence equals death. And I think for the Parkinson's community, we've been silent for too long, and that's led to needless suffering. 8 years after Larry Kramer and his colleagues formed this organization, we had protease inhibitors, which have allowed for people with HIV to have a near normal life expectancy, which is not true of Parkinson's disease. It's allowed nearly 90% of people with the disease to be aware of their diagnosis, not true for Parkinson's disease. It's allowed 90% of people with aware of their diagnosis to be appropriately treated, not true for Parkinson's disease. And it's allowed 90% of people who are being treated to have levels of the virus suppressed in their blood. These are all gifts that we've received from previous generations. Just like we have an obligation to receive gifts, we also have an obligation to reciprocate. And so I think the challenge to all of us here today is to create a world where Parkinson's disease is not increasingly common, but increasingly rare. And we can do that by eliminating the environmental causes of the disease in our environment. Paraquat's been around since the 1960s. Few of us would drive cars from the 1960s. Few of us would fly in an airplane from the 1960s. If engineers can come up with safer planes and safer cars, they can come up with safer chemists, can come up with safer pesticides. The price of dry cleaning should not be Parkinson's disease. I think we can all agree on that. And we have demonstrated that we can dramatically reduce air pollution in our environment. We've done that. The skies over Los Angeles today are 50 to 90% cleaner than they were in the 1950s and 60s. That's with more people driving more cars, larger distances, and with the economy growing and larger than it has ever been before. The challenge for all of us here today is to take on the challenges that Candace Leitner did, that the March of Dimes did, that Larry Kramer did, and is create a world without Parkinson's disease. As a neurologist, I can't think of a greater gift to give future generations than that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Dorsey. As you guys can tell, I was able to see Dr. Dorsey at World Parkinson's Congress and came back and immediately reached out to him to come talk here today, because I don't think we think about this as often as we should. And the whole goal is that we all need to go out and take action. So with that being said, we have time for questions. There are people who will be coming around with a microphone. Please do not ask your question until you have the microphone. Let's try to keep it not personal. I know everyone has a personal story that they want to share, but let's keep questions where they can apply to everybody. And we have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Doctor. What is the pesticide that's currently on the market that contains paraquat?
So the brand name of it is called Gramoxone. That's its brand name.
Thank you.
I see questions out here in the front. Oh, thank you.
Are the slides or charts in your book?
Many of them are.
Okay, thank you.
I have a question. A lot of the people in this room have a spouse with them who doesn't have Parkinson's, and I would assume that means that those of us who do, before we were married and were living together, were exposed to something different, or?
So there are some studies that question is when both spouses have Parkinson's disease.
No, when one, what's the difference between the exposure of one spouse and the other if they live together and go to a lot of the same places together?
I think the exposure for Parkinson's disease, the most relevant exposure is childhood and young adult exposure. It might even be in utero exposure. Some of you guys know about the Brian Grant Foundation. So Brian Grant, former NBA basketball player, was a 3-year-old boy when he was at Camp Lejeune. His father dies of esophageal cancer linked to the chemical. His younger brother nearly dies while living at Camp Lejeune, miraculously gets better after they leave the base. And 30 years later, he develops Parkinson's disease. So I think for most people, the relevant exposure is what you were doing when you were a child. Did you grow up on a farm? Did you grow up when the pesticides were being sprayed above you?
Would you put your last slide up?
Yes, they'll help me. Yes, so if you have, by the way, yes, you all got copies. If you have questions or stories now, get to them, info@endingpd.org. You can email me anytime.
What role do you think genetics plays in Parkinson's?
So what role does genetics play? I think it plays a small role. I think it may explain why certain individuals exposed to a chemical, say paraquat, develop the disease while others do not. I think Dr. Paul's going to talk about this a little bit. We know that only 10% of smokers get lung cancer, so obviously there have to be other factors that determines who among the smokers develops the disease and who doesn't. I think that's role of exposure, dose, duration, timing, and route. I think there are genetic interactions so that we know that certain individuals metabolize these chemicals more efficiently or maybe at lower risk, and other people may metabolize these chemicals less well and therefore be at higher risk. We know that GBA, I think Dr. Paul is going to talk about this, common genetic risk factor for Parkinson's, the most common genetic risk factor, has interactions with pesticides. So people who carry that genetic mutation might be at higher risk, more susceptible to the effects of these chemicals than people who don't. But just remember, almost everyone here doesn't carry it. Yes, sir. Oh, I'm sorry. Someone's going to tell me where. Oh, sorry. Yes, ma'am. Or yes, sir.
Hello. Does Guam have any known pesticides related to this?
Guam, and you're talking about Parkinson's and ALS at Guam.
Yeah.
Yeah. So next book we're writing right now, due to the publisher on Monday, called The Parkinson's Plan, 25 recommendations to help you lower your risk of Parkinson's and perhaps slow your rate of progression. We open up the chapter on food, on pesticides with the story of Guam. During World War II, Japan not only bombed Pearl Harbor, but they took over occupied Guam. The indigenous populations there were forced into labor camps and treated harshly. Many of them went away into the fields and relied on indigenous crops, including seeds from a plant called the cycad plant. And they ground up the seed into flour, and they knew that it was dangerous to do so, and under normal circumstances, they would wash it thoroughly, wash it over a series of 3 weeks. feed it to chickens to make sure that it was safe before making flour and tortillas out of it. It turns out that during this occupation, they didn't have that time. And it turned out that that seed, that flour, contained a naturally occurring chemical called BMAA. I told you that there's naturally occurring pesticides because plants don't like to be eaten by insects. Seeds don't like to be eaten by other animals either, so they have toxins. This toxin, BMAA, damages the energy-producing parts of cells and produces both ALS and Parkinson's disease. It turned out that not only did the indigenous population eat the seed and the flour, but they also ate the bats that ate the seed that would then concentrate the toxin in the fat of the bat. And they would eat the bat and would eat 100 times the concentration that they would eat in the seed and develop it. After the occupation ended, the bats disappeared because people started shooting them, and the disease miraculously disappeared. When you get rid of the exposure, you get rid of the disease. Yes, sir.
So you focused on 3 specific items, the paraquat, the TCE, and air pollution. Are those because you think those are just the most widespread influence and there are other things that also cause the disease, or why did you pick those 3 particular ones? And if we drive those down, what else will emerge?
Okay, so there are other pesticides. Paraquat's the one which is the most evidence. Are you going to talk about other pesticides? Dr. Paul's going to tell you about other pesticides. DDT and its other ones dissolve in fat. I think they're really important. TCE is just so widespread that I think it's the most important cause of disease in the United States. And air pollution levels in the United States are relatively low compared to other parts of the world, although highly variable. Some underserved communities have higher levels of air pollution, bigger risk factor than that. There are probably other chemicals, but I think those are the biggest ones. PCBs and things used in electronics industry, heavy metals, others. I think Dr. Paul might even just touch on a few. But those are the big ones. Yes?
It seems to me that Roundup is the most commonly used pesticide in my neighborhood. What is the chemical in Roundup, and what's going on with Monsanto and trying to get Roundup off the market? Can you comment on that, please?
So the chemical in Roundup is called glyphosate. Dr. Paul knows more than I do. It appears not to be a major risk factor in Parkinson's. So all the chemicals that I've described to you, they have a few common characteristics. They're all inhaled or they're all ingested. They all damage the energy-producing parts of cells called the mitochondria. Many of you know that our brain is relatively small. It's only 2% of our body weight, yet it consumes 20% of our energy. And then nerve cells, neurons, consume 75% of that energy. And then among neurons, the most energy demanding of them are those among the most energy demanding are those dopamine producing nerve cells, which if you stretch them out are 4 meters in length. They have at least 1 million different connections, and they're not insulated, they're not myelinated, so they have huge energy demand. So I think if you look for toxins, pesticides, chemicals that are inhaled or ingested that damage the energy producing parts of nerve cells, those are the ones. And many of these pesticides, especially paraquat, have been demonstrated to reproduce the disease in animal models. So it's not all pesticides. Many pesticides probably have no relationship at all, perhaps most don't, to Parkinson's disease. It's just specific ones. Yes, I see lots of questions.
Hi.
Yes.
I'm an Air Force veteran, worked in aircraft maintenance my whole career. Trichloroethylene was a very common use during my entire career. So I have a 2-part question. Does this symposium offer any help with VA claims? It's a challenging process. And the other is there any detoxification treatments that you say eliminate the cause, eliminate the disease? Is there anything that can detox your system?
Yes. So first of all, thank you very much for your service. I'll defer the VA one to the Parkinson's Association here. Obviously very concerning because Air Force mechanics, you can't come up with a higher risk factor, I think, for exposure to TCE than that. Can you detoxify it? There have been studies trying to lower levels of metals. It turns out that heavy metals are elevated in people with Parkinson's disease, I think from air pollution. And there was a recent study in the New England Journal of Medicine that showed that a chelator that would take the metal out of the brain didn't work. It worked, it decreased the levels of metals, but not only was harmful, it made people worse. I don't think we know if there's ways to get it out. I think it's hard to do because I think the damage that has been done happened, for you probably 20, 30, 40 years ago. I think it's really important. By the time someone gets diagnosed with Parkinson's, many of you know that 60% of the nerve cells have already died. So you have these 40% remaining. I would protect them vigilantly. And so I would avoid chemicals. I would avoid, for example, using dry cleaners that use perchloroethylene. I avoid pesticides in all forms, not including food. I wash my food in your garden, in your yard, what your neighbor's using. If you have a well water, I put a carbon filter on them. Exercise is probably our most effective intervention in terms of slowing the rate of Parkinson's disease. Exercise, as many of you know, releases growth factors that protect those nerve cells. So while you can't undo the damage, you can probably slow it by doing lots of things by protecting those remaining nerve cells that you have. I'll just say that stories are like yours. Every time I see one with Parkinson's disease, I get upset now. Exactly because of what you're experiencing, because I know that this is a preventable disease. That there's no reason that anyone should be suffering like you're suffering, like your wife's suffering, like your family's suffering. These diseases have causes. We need to find out what those causes are and eliminate them. They don't just happen by accident. Yes, sir.
I was wondering whether there has been any study correlating the deficiency of the supplements that contribute to the production of dopamine.
So there have been studies on supplements and Parkinson's. So there's one supplement called muconopurines. I don't know if that's what you're getting at. The muconopurines is from a velvet bean plant. It turns out that this velvet bean plant, widely prevalent in Southeast Asia, has levels of levodopa in it, and so it can be quite beneficial for people with the disease. There have been studies of other supplements like coenzyme Q10 in people with early Parkinson's, and they've shown not to be beneficial. So nothing has been shown yet, to my knowledge, in terms of supplements, besides muconopurines. Yes. Okay, yes, sir.
Would you
Go ahead.
encourage us to eat only organic foods?
So my wife used to tell me all this, especially when we had kids, and I poo-pooed it all. I used to think that the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe were safe. I no longer have that at all. At all. So I buy organic. I wash my organic produce with a big bowl and with a pesticide wash. You can get it like a vegetable wash, which is essentially just soap. And I wash all my produce. The Department of Agriculture, when it measures the residues on fruit, like apples, to determine whether it's safe, it does so after they've been under cold water for 15 to 20 seconds. So I did a 5-second pause, we'd still be washing it. So if that's what the Department of Agriculture is doing, think about what you should be doing. So yes. Foods are concentrated in animal products. So I told you about how the bat ate the seeds and concentrated it. Turns out that that cows eat grass or pineapple chop contaminated with pesticides concentrated in their milk, and then humans get it, and then they have higher rates of Parkinson's. Yeah.
Question.
Oh, sorry.
First of all, thank you. And with the increasing data that's showing a gut-brain health link in the foods we eat, and just a general observation, I don't know if most people are aware of it, but in the 60s, R.J.R. Reynolds was a tobacco producer. Today, they're one of the top food producers, and so is Philip Morris. And we're all more and more unhealthy, imagine that. But anyway, my point is that with the data coming out, do you have any information that would identify the benefits of healthy eating and its impact? And why is the medical industry largely ignorant to the fact that they're not looking at root causes?
Yeah, so when you guys were in school, how many obese children were in your class? There's maybe one, none, right? None. In 1990, 10% of Americans were obese. If you look at pictures from the 1960s, no one's obese. They're all thin. They're thinner than I am. So what's changed? Diet. I mean, who's putting soda into schools? We are. I mean, it is crazy that 40% of Americans are obese, 35% of adult Americans are obese. There are reasons for this. They are preventable, they are addressable. In our lifetime, obesity, we know, went from almost non-existent, rare, to almost the norm. I don't think that's right. And so there are studies that show that Mediterranean diet is beneficial for people with Parkinson's disease, and it may lower your risk of disease. Mediterranean diet is high in fruits and vegetables, low in animal products. Animals concentrate these toxic chemicals as they go up the food chain. I worry. I like cheese, and I worry about the cheese I buy because cheese is high in fat and it concentrates toxins, and I worry about that to this day. You know, the more you know, the more you see. Once you see it all around you, and you can't unsee it, and you need to take action. You have a responsibility, not an obligation, to create the world better, not only for your peers, but for your children and for future generations. I think you just speak.
Hi. Thank you for your presentation and your book.
Thank you.
Very helpful. I'm just wondering if there's litigation, either through Parkinson's organizations or individuals, such as the gentleman who just spoke about 30 years being an airline mechanic. It seemed to, if not work, at least make more prevalent knowledge, and finally got rid of a lot of the pesticides ostensibly in Roundup and things like that. It certainly worked some on the smoking producers, the cigarette, even pipe smokers. So are there large class action suits, or is that just a thing of the past?
So I view lawsuits as occurring when we have failed to act as a community, and when our representatives have failed. And there are lawsuits, there are companies, there are individuals suing the manufacturers of Paraquat for their Parkinson's disease. A Marine named Jerry Insminger was a drill instructor at Camp Lejeune when his 6-year-old daughter, Janie, developed leukemia. Less than 3 years later, she died. He learned about the cancer-causing chemicals from a TV news broadcast, dropped his plate of spaghetti, and then realized it wasn't just his daughter that likely died from these chemicals, but it was all the Marines he had trained as a drill instructor. You know, the motto of the Marines is Semper Fi, always faithful, and he said the role of a leader is to take accountability for the people that you are serving. And so after a 24-year career, and the retired Master Sergeant has launched a 27-year effort to bring justice for those Marines. And so there's the Camp Lejeune Justice Act, which was passed a year or two ago, that allows Marines who served between 1953 and 1987 to sue the federal government, normally immune from such suits. And so that's why you see all those ads on TV. I think when we're seeing these lawsuits, we're seeing a failure for us to come to grips and recognize that these chemicals are causing these diseases in our communities, and we need to tell our politicians and our representatives to do so. And we can act in our own community. Why are pesticides being sprayed on schools in Denver? Why is soda in our kids' schools? These are all things that we're allowing to do. These are reflections of our values and our commitments, and I think we've been ignorant for way, way, way too long and way too quiet. Yes, ma'am.
Well, you just answered my question. Why, in the face of all this incredible knowledge that the scientific community has given us, how come we haven't taken action to bring these people before Congress and talk about banning their...
So you're going to hear from Dr. Paul and Dr. Me, and most of our peers are unaware of this, I would say. There are reasons that we are ignorant. Mm-hmm. There are reasons we are ignorant. And I showed you why we're ignorant about Paraquat. They had internal memos, according to reporting from The Guardian, that were concerned that pesticide study in Canada would lead us to conclude that pesticides were a causal factor in the disease. So they would publish papers, according to The Guardian, that would discredit the science. They prevented my colleague from serving on an EPA advisory committee because they thought she would be damaging. There are reasons that this is being done. We're now, you've now seen, you've taken the red pill or the blue pill, and you've been enlightened. And so we need to make our voices heard, just like the Mothers Against Drunk Driving did so.
That's what I was going to say, that when they started, they didn't know how many members of Congress there were. Is the Senate the one that has 100? I mean, you know, they just started with very little knowledge about how to take civic action.
Exactly.
It seems to me that that's our next step.
I agree with you 100%.
And you've done, the scientific community has really given us a head start on how to take care of it.
And the people who changed this aren't scientists. So I showed polio. It wasn't neurologists who were leading the prize. Mothers Against Drunk Driving didn't start because of a trauma surgeon. Polio didn't start because of an infectious disease. It was because ordinary Americans, when confronted with it, took extraordinary actions and changed the course of history. Yes, yes, sir.
Yeah, my question is, DDT at the time, is there a correlation between DDT and Parkinson's, even though it's not being used for over 50 years? And if so, it hasn't been used in over 50 years. Is there a reduction because it's not being used, or what?
Yeah, so there are studies linking DDT, and it belongs to a class of pesticides called organochlorines, which, you know, chlorine is the same as trichloroethylene. They're fat soluble, they get into the fat. And it turns out that a disease called dementia with Lewy bodies disease, some of you may know this disease, is Parkinson's and dementia, it's the second most common cause of dementia in the world after Alzheimer's disease, wasn't described until 1976. And because I briefly mentioned that I think some pesticides are ingested in the beginning in the gut and they rise up. So this psychiatrist, Kenji Kosaka, he said, I got a person with Parkinson's and dementia, and I look at their brains and they got these Lewy bodies throughout their brain. I thought it might begin in the gut, so I went back and I said, well, what's going on in the food supply in Japan in 1976? It turns out that DDT levels in people's fat was obviously absent in the 1930s and 40s, and then started rising in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, coinciding with this new illness being described, dementia with Lewy bodies. There are some parts of the world, like Europe, where Parkinson's is flattening or declining. They're among the areas of the world that have gotten rid of DDT and organochlorines at the earliest. Pesticide use globally is still rising. In Africa, which historically has not used pesticide use has tripled in the last just 30 years. 60% of the population there is in agriculture.
Two more questions, one there and one here. Hi, the prevalence of Parkinson's is much higher in men than in women, and I'm wondering if the studies that are cited apply or have been done on women as well as men, and also if the progression of the disease or exposure is that much different for women than men. Thanks.
So there are some suggestions that biology might influence who develops Parkinson's disease and who doesn't. This appears to be true in laboratory animals. I think the differences between men and women are sociological, not biological. Indeed, most parts of the world, men are 40% increased risk than women, but in the United States, 75% of farmers are men, 97% of pesticide applicators are men, most mechanics are men. And in some parts of the world, women have the disease at equal rates to men, and in some cases they're even higher. Japan, Taiwan, and maybe South Korea. Dr. Paul might help me out a little bit. And they're the same. And I looked back, and it turned out, guess who did most of the farming in those communities? Women. So I think it's a reflection that sex differences, I think, are largely a fraction of sociology and not biology. Yes, sir.
Yes. What company makes paraquat? I know that's probably not a question you wanted to answer. And also, do they make TCE too, or?
The companies that make them are different. You can readily search that. I will just say that I'll say this. So I wrote a paper called Paraquat, Parkinson's Disease, and Agnotology. Guess who shows up at my doorstep, knocks on the door? My son answers the door because a law firm, a prestigious law firm representing the company, wanted to issue me a deposition looking for all the records that I had related to that paper. So you can imagine if someone knocked on your door, your teenage son answers the door because they're trying to serve a deposition, not a deposition, who's a lawyer in the room? Subpoena, thank you, to your father. If they're doing that to me, what are they doing to you? Thank you.
So I hope all of you are getting our e-news, but if you are, on Tuesday, it was the National Call to Action Day. And the link that was in our e-news actually takes you to the Michael J. Fox Foundation site to sign on to a letter to end the use of paraquat in the United States. So again, if you're not getting our e-news, please go to the PAR table and sign up. Make sure that you are, because we will always provide opportunities to do that. If you weren't able to do that on Tuesday, let us know, and we are happy to get you the link and how to go in. If we don't take action, I mean, when I heard this presentation, I was mad. And so I hope you're mad today and that you will go out and take action, and you need to call your Congress people. I mean, if we don't lift this up and all of us use our voices to fight this, nothing's going to change. So thank you, Dr. Dorsey, for that. So now it's time for our first Energize break. And I want to welcome Shruti Kesker, who will be leading us in stretching demonstration. Shruti is a yoga teacher and yoga therapist and holds a master's degree in yoga with yoga research as her major. She has a background in naturopathic medicine and has been teaching yoga for over 20 years. For the past few years, her focus has been teaching to seniors and those diagnosed with Parkinson's. Her class style ranges from hatha, gentle flow, beginner, and chair yoga at a rehab hospital. You can attend Shruti's Yoga for PD, which is open to all levels, on Mondays at 9:30 at Summer & Glen in Centennial, or her lower intensity chair yoga class on Wednesdays at 1 o'clock at Encompass Health in Littleton. So let's give a warm welcome to Shruti.
Good morning. It's so amazing to see everyone. So let's start our Energizer break. We've been seating for a long time, so I would welcome all of you to stand up. And those who wish to be seated, you can continue sitting on the chair. A lot of the stretches I'm going to teach, we can do it on the chair. So if you're standing, let the chair be in front of you. You can stand behind the chair. We are going to just start with a little warm-ups. I like to warm up the body before getting into yoga poses. So we're going to start with a little stomping of the feet, bending the knees. We've been sitting for long, so let's just move our lower body here. Very good. And then start with a little wider stance here. So I'm going to start standing with a wide stance. My feet are just under the hips. From here, we are going to start to roll the shoulders. With Parkinson's, as we age, we start to round our back. So I like to move the shoulders like many times of the day, just to remind ourselves to open. And then take a deep breath in, inhale, and breathe out through the mouth. Beautiful. Inhale. Let it go. I do this open mouth breathing all the time in my classes with Colorado Elevation, with all the anxiety that builds up with everything. Take a nice inhale. Let it go. Now let's bring the arms in. Inhale, arms up. Exhale, hands to the heart. Very good. Inhale, arms up. At your own pace, exhale. Very good. One last time. Inhale. And let it go. Very good. A little more shoulder stretches. Let's open the arms in the front. We're going to open the heart here. Inhale. Exhale. If you're bumping into neighbors, just don't go too wide. You can just open a little bit. Very good. Come back in. Once again, inhale. Exhale. And release. Very good. Now, any modification, if you feel you can't too much, if your shoulder doesn't rise up, go as much as you can. You can always do as much as you can. Bring your hands to the heart, interlacing the fingers. Again, couple options. You can stretch the arms up, bring it down. If that feels too much, you can just reach and come back. This is all lengthening the spine. Inhale. Exhale. Very good. Inhale. Beautiful. Exhale. One more time. Nice breaths. Inhale. Very good. Come back to the center. Nice. Now I'm getting into all the fundamental movements of the spine. We are stretching the spine up. Let's take a side stretch. Keeping that wide stance, that gives us nice stability. Feel free to keep holding the chair if you want to. Reach up the arms. We can grasp the opposite wrist or keep the palms to touch, pointer up, whichever way. We are going to take a side stretch. Very good. Come back in. I like to go in and out. So let's do that 3 more times. 1. Very good. 2, any one side, doesn't matter. And 3. I like to repeat it because we might go a little further when we do the next time. Now let's switch. We're going to take it to the other side and stretch the other side, opening up. Very good. Nice. 1 more time. And 2 more. Exhale. I always bend and exhale. Very good. Come back to the center. Release. Couple rolls with the shoulders. Remind the shoulders to loosen up. We often hold a lot of tension in our upper back. So I like to loosen that up. I always like to focus on the breathing. Our breathing is connected how we feel. When we are overwhelmed, we breathe from here. When we breathe out deeper, we start to relax. Our mind shifts into parasympathetic. Take a nice inhale. Let it go. Let's start with our fundamental yoga pose. We're going to start with our feet wide as the hips, coming into mountain. Now I want you to hold on to the chair and just do a little centering. I like to do this. We're going to roll through the toes and roll to the heels. Just a little bit, doesn't have to be too much. Very good. Now when you roll on the toes, you feel the front of the body engaged. When you roll on the heels, the back of the body engages. Now come back to center. Now see if you can press the toes and heels at the same time. Stand taller. Couple shoulder rolls. Remember, your heart is a flashlight pointing front. Always remember to open the heart. Very good. Now let's take an inhale, arms up, and we're going to come palms to touch, mountain pose. Looks like a simple one. There's a lot happening here. Engaging the core and the back and the anti-gravity muscles here. Putting equal weight on both feet. We are not sticking our butt out. We are not focusing on one leg. We are keeping equal pressure. Very good. Stay here. 2 deep breaths. Inhale. Let it go. Very good. Inhale. Let it go. Release. Very good. That's a lot of arm work. Release the arms. Right. Now we did our nice mountain pose standing. Let's see how our balance is. I know it's not going to be a good topic to talk about. Balance is not our friend. So we are going to just work on standing on one leg. And remember, we are going to hold on to the chair the whole time. Our balancing poses help us to bring focus, works on our balance centers, memory, and alertness. We start with feet wide, just like our mountain pose, and keep holding the chair. You can stand behind the chair. We are going to shift our weight on one leg and just lift one leg up. And just like that, keep holding the chair. We don't have to rush to let go the chair. Now, the key to balance is you're going to keep staring at something which is not moving. Definitely not me, because I'm going to move. So anything which is not moving in front of you, the banners, the light, the mic, anything. And then if you feel ready, maybe the other arm goes up. Take your time. Now, some of us want to stay right here. Keep feeling that on that leg. There's no pressure. If it's too much, you can step down. If it feels okay. Some of us are feeling adventure. Maybe tiptoe the fingers. Keep staring at a point. The gaze you fix helps you to balance. Very good. One more breath here. And slowly release. That's very good. That's amazing balance, everyone. I know balance can be tricky. Every day is different. I meet you tomorrow and you might be standing on one leg for 10 minutes. Who knows, right? So you're going to come here. You're going to take it to the other side. Now again, one side is stronger always. One side is flexible than the other. So keep rooting through that, both feet. Keep staring at front. Find your gaze. We call it drishti in yoga in Sanskrit, where we are fixing your eyeballs. When your eyeballs don't move, the proprioception helps to keep the balance. Your body in space. The brain resets itself, the center of gravity. Once you're here, take your time again. Again, one arm can go up, whichever side you want to do. Doesn't matter. Again, keep staring at a point. Some of us might stay right here. Keep pressing through that foot. Very good. If you feel a little adventure, maybe tiptoe the finger, maybe hands to the heart, whichever feels good. Modifications, whatever you feel good. One more breath here, and then slowly release. That's amazing. That's very good balance, everyone. So let's come here now. We are going to come into a little stretches, coming into our warrior stretch. We're going to stand behind the chair and come into lunge. So I'm going to show you how I'm doing this. 1 foot front, 1 foot back. My other foot, which is at the back, is not in line with this front. So keeping a little wider stance. So if I'm here, I'm stepping that foot outwards. So coming into that lunge here. Now I want you to lift that back heel and press it down. Once again, lift your back heel, press it down, and one more time. Very good. Now once you press that back heel, let's bend that front knee. And come back up. You feel that stretch into the back leg. Very good. And one more time. Very good. Now, if your stance is smaller, you don't have to go deeper in the lunge. Your knee is just above the ankle. Come into a comfortable lunge. We are going to stay here for the next 30 minutes. I'm kidding. Just few seconds. Shoulders relax. No tension in the upper body. Lift your heart. If it feels good, one arm goes up. If it feels good, other. If that doesn't feel good, one arm stays on the chair. Very good, stay there. Very good, take a nice inhale, breathe out. Once again, inhale, let it go. Very good, slowly release. And we can always hold longer. I just want to give a glimpse of how it feels when we hold. Come back to the center. Take a nice inhale. Exhale. Inhale, let it go. Very good. Warrior poses build in strength and focus and flexibility. We are going to do it on the other side. Again, we want to keep a little wider stance. We don't want to stand in tightrope. That's not going to be stable. Keep it a little wider stance. The back toes open out. Once you're here, lift that back heel, press it down. Once again, lift that back heel, press it down. One more time. Now the reason I do that is I want to engage my calf muscles and glutes. Once I'm ready with my back leg, I start to get into that lunge. Come back up. Very good. Once again, get into that lunge. Come back up. I like to go in and out just to warm up the muscles. Very good. Now when you're ready, take that lunge. Stay there. Keep that focus. You can keep holding the chair if that feels good, or maybe arms go up, or maybe one arm goes up, whichever feels good. Each of us is different. Every day we feel different in our bodies, honoring that. Now feel the sensation in the legs. Inhale. Let it go. Inhale. Let it go. Very good. Release. Come back to the center. Very good. Wiggle the legs. Let's take our feet wide. Let's take circles. 1, 2, and opposite side. 1 and 2. Come on, very good. Now all of you are welcome to sit on the chair. For the last 1 minute, I'm going to give a little guided meditative relaxation. So welcome to sit on the chair comfortably and let everything drop into the chair. Let the back rest on the chair. Shoulders are relaxed, legs are relaxed. And again, couple shoulder rolls to remind to release the upper back. Close your eyes. If you feel comfortable, close your eyes, or you can keep them open. Take a nice inhale and breathe out. Just connecting with the breath. Notice how that feels. Closing your eyes, notice the inhale filling up, expansion, and notice the exhale, emptying it, letting go. Bring your awareness to all the body parts, toes, heels, ankles, shoulders. Bringing your hands to the heart. Gratitude for this body, this practice, and the community that supports us. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Shruti. That was perfect. So now for our second speaker of the day, Dr. Kimberly Paul is an assistant professor of neurology and neurodegenerative disease and environmental epidemiologist. Her research uses omic technologies to describe disease processes and explain risk at a biologic level in population-based studies. Her epidemiologic research uses genetic, epigenetic, and metabolomic measurements to help understand how environment exposures influence Parkinson's disease. Please give a warm welcome to Dr. Paul.
Great. Thank you so much for having me today. So it's really, really exciting to see all of you. My name is Kimberly Paul. I'm an assistant professor of neurology at UCLA and an epidemiologist by training. So that means primarily what I do is research what could be causing Parkinson's through analyzing large populations of patients primarily, including researching pesticides. So that's primarily what I'm going to be focusing on today, the contributions of pesticides to PD and what we've learned from 25 years of research in agricultural communities in California's Central Valley. So first, it's always a good idea to report who is funding your research, so I did want to put that up here for all of you to see. So as I mentioned, I'm going to be speaking about pesticides and the contributions specifically of pesticides to PD. So why pesticides? And Dr. Dorsey gave a great overview of this. So I'm going to reiterate a bit of what you've already heard. But what we know from large genetic studies is that the heritability of PD is around 30%. So that means on a population level, only about 30% of PD can be attributed to genetic causes. We also know that only about 15% of patients have a family history of the disease, and maybe 5% to 10% have a known genetic cause. So what this means is that PD is largely influenced by environmental factors and exposures. Now, currently, it's believed that a combination of genetic mutations and environmental exposures are responsible for causing PD in most patients. So what that means is that for most, we don't believe that the genetics are enough to cause PD on its own. We also don't believe that the environment is enough for many patients to cause PD. So you likely need both. And it's likely a very complicated interplay between the two, which leads to the disease. So of all of the environmental exposures that have been linked to Parkinson's, pesticides have some of the, not only the longest, but the most compelling links to PD, which I'll get to. But first, and one of the questions hit on this, I do want to point out that a number of different environmental exposures have been linked to PD. So you can see several of them here, including pesticides at the bottom, but along with other exposures like heavy metals, solvents, so like TCE that Dr. Dorsey talked about, as well as traumatic brain injuries. So it's likely that there are going to be different types of exposures in different people that lead to the same disease processes. So pesticides are just one area where a lot of research has taken place. So a little background, why are we using pesticides? Well, mainly agricultural food production and increasing crop yields. So that is very important. Also, importantly, as public health vector controls. So for instance, controlling mosquito populations to prevent things like malaria or West Nile. And then also as insect and weed management in both our commercial and private places. So along our roadsides, in our parks, in golf courses, things like that. So common routes of exposure include occupational use, then also residential proximity to agriculture. So just kind of living near the fields and the places where they're applying the pesticides that the applications can then drift from. And then again, our own personal use in our homes and gardens, and pesticide residues on foods and the produce that we eat. So this is generally below those legal limits that the government has set, but it is very ubiquitous. So again, Dr. Dorsey hit on this. Pesticide use really started to take off in the 1950s, and use has been increasing worldwide since then. So you can see on the graph on the left, this is a graph of the pesticide production and imports in the United States since 1940. So this is showing that consistent increase in both of those in the US since then. The figure on the right then shows the tons of pesticides that are applied by continent now in 2020. So you can see they are widely used. The United States is one of the top users, but they're widely used worldwide. So bringing this to Parkinson's, since starting in 1992, dozens of different studies from around the world in different populations have now shown that occupational pesticide use, so actually mixing or spraying the pesticides as part of your job, has been associated with an increased risk of Parkinson's. So this summary figure is what's known as a meta-analysis. So it takes all of the individual risk estimates and combines them into a more powerful individual estimate. So what this shows is that people with occupational pesticide exposure probably have at least a 60 to 70% higher risk of PD. Many studies have also shown that rural living, or growing up near the farm, living near the farms, or just living in proximity to these commercial pesticide applications is also related to a higher risk. So this is, again, a meta-analysis showing that dozens and dozens of different studies have shown this, demonstrating that people with this proximity to commercial pesticide use probably have at least a 40%, but maybe higher risk of PD. So around the time that these first pesticide and PD studies were being published in 1999, Beata Ritz and Jeff Braunstein began conducting a study of pesticides in agricultural regions of California's Central Valley. So I actually started working on this study in 2010. Now, a lot of what I'm going to go over has been based on research in this Parkinson's Environment and Genes, or PEG study. It's actually still ongoing. We're in our third round of recruitment, which is going to wrap up this year. And overall, it includes close to 2,500 participants. 1,200 of them have idiopathic Parkinson's disease, and they're all clinically evaluated by movement disorder specialists to confirm that. So as I mentioned, PEG is based in these three agricultural communities that you can see here, Kern, Fresno, and Tulare counties, where for the most part, farmland surrounds the urban and even suburban or rural locations. And one of the main goals of this study has always been to study pesticide contributions to Parkinson's. So it's also population-based, meaning that our goal is to find the patients in the community. So we're not recruiting only from specific medical centers or clinics. Now, some of the earlier studies that we did confirmed what these previous epidemiologic studies had shown. So for instance, we also see that occupational pesticide use is related to a higher risk of Parkinson's. So in our study, this direct occupational exposure was related to a 2.5 times risk of PD, or 250%. Then we also found that personal use of pesticides, so in our homes or in our gardens, also was related to a higher risk of PD, though this was somewhat lower than the risk found for the direct occupational exposure. So you can see here that frequently using pesticides in our homes was related to about a 50% higher risk of PD. But the issue here was that this, along with all those studies in the meta-analyses that I showed, show links to pesticide exposure in general. But this is actually a very, very broad category. So we know that hundreds of different pesticides are used. So for both our research, finding out what's causing PD, but regulating pesticides and preventing PD in the future, we needed to be more specific about what pesticides are actually the agents responsible. So this is where research in California becomes unique and why we set the studies up there. Now, California has mandated by law what's known as the pesticide use reporting, or the PUR system. So this began in 1974 and mandates by law that all commercial pesticide use, so anything they're spraying in the farms for agriculture, for things like that, need to be reported to the state, to the agricultural commissioner's office. So these PUR reports, which are then public data, tell us the location, the amount of pesticides that were applied, and applications now going back 50 years. So from this, we know in California, like we know in the countrywide trends and in those global trends, that pesticide use is increasing in the state. So more pesticides are being applied. And we also know that more acres of farmland are being treated as well. So in our PEG study, what we do is link this pesticide use report information, which again goes back to 1974, to land use maps, and then also lifetime residential address histories for our patients and for the non-PD control population. So we have their workplace address histories and we have their residential address histories for everybody. So that's what these figures are showing. So with this, we're able to get yearly exposure estimates for every individual pesticide that's been applied commercially in the state, including the amount of pesticides that was applied in a buffer around the patient's homes, going back 50 years now. So this is an ambient, what we call an ambient exposure estimate. So it's just due to living or working near them. It's not due to applying them. It's just due to living near them. Now we have these long-term records, again, that we can rely on instead of actually having to ask people what they were exposed to 20 to 30 years ago, which some people may remember, but others, that's a long time ago. So you can imagine there's a lot of issues with just having to ask. So before we get into what we've learned from the studies using this data, we of course ask the question, well, does this PUR data represent human exposure to people who are living in the areas around? And thankfully, we have research to help answer that question. So there was a study that was referenced here several years ago, which measured a pesticide known as diazinon. So that's an organophosphate using community air monitors actually placed on schools in the towns that are not too far, but not directly near the farms. So the goal was to assess potential drift of the pesticides from these fields to schools in the towns. And what you can see on the right here in the graph in blue is the amount of diazinon that was actually measured on these school monitors. So it's in the air getting to these schools. And then in the purple is the amount of diazinon that was reported to this PUR system. So this is the amount of diazinon that growers in the area, applicators in the area reported applying. So you can see that they track very well and that this PUR system is reflecting applications pretty accurately and pesticides that may actually drift from where they were applied to neighboring schools, houses, workplaces, potentially exposing people. So paraquat. With this PUR data, we're then able to start researching specific pesticides. So we're not talking about pesticides in general. We're starting to be able to research specific chemicals and figure out how they may be linked to PD. So one of the first individual pesticides that we looked at was paraquat. So we've already talked about it. I'm sure many of you have heard about it before even coming to this event with the ongoing lawsuits. But paraquat, as Dr. Dorsey really briefly covered, actually first came into scrutiny in the 1980s due to its structural similarity to that drug known as MPTP. So Bill Langston, a neurologist, actually identified a cluster of young people in the 1980s that all developed Parkinsonism. Now they had ingested recreational drugs that contained this metabolite or this chemical known as MPTP. So what he found was that there was actually a toxic metabolite. So after it gets into our bodies and we digest it a little bit, there's a toxic endpoint of it that caused Parkinsonism. Now this was MPP+. So you can see it here in the middle that MPP+ was very structurally similar to paraquat. So this really started the paraquat and PD investigations, again, in the 1980s. Now, in PEG, what we see is that long-term ambient exposure, so again, just living or working near agricultural applications of paraquat, was related, over a 30-year period prior to diagnosis, was related to double the risk of PD. So we saw this in 2 independent study waves. So we have what we call PEG 1 and PEG 2. They're different sets of patients and people that we recruited some 10 years apart from each other. We also saw that there was no change after we co-adjusted for all sorts of other potential exposures that may be important. So other pesticides that the fields were using, other occupational exposures, heavy metals, things like that. So those are all shown in what's known as a dot plot that you can see here. So our primary analysis is again on top, and you can see that risk estimate, the dot, is far above the line, which shows 0, which would be no association. So we're seeing double the risk here. Now, one somewhat surprising observation that we had from this study, which we've now replicated again in both of those 2 independent study waves, PEG 1 and PEG 2, is that for the paraquat associations, the effects had a much higher magnitude in patients who were diagnosed younger. So among those diagnosed prior to 60, what we see is over a 3.5-fold increase in the risk of PD among those diagnosed prior to or before 60. So among those diagnosed after 60, it's 70%. So still highly meaningful, still highly statistically significant, but a much lower magnitude than those diagnosed younger. Now, Dr. Dorsey hit on this, but paraquat is actually banned for use in many, many other of the big agricultural regions. So that includes China, it includes Europe, it includes Brazil. In the US, unfortunately, the use is actually increasing. So that is what you can see in this graph here. This is in California from the PUR system, where it's showing the pounds of paraquat that have been applied in California since 1974. So you can see increasing trends. So there is work to get it banned in the US. Jody just actually mentioned a letter that you can all sign on to. So the Michael J. Fox Foundation is working to try to lobby the EPA to get this regulated and banned. Now, some of the increase that we see in the last 10 years is actually due to overuse of glyphosate or Roundup, which led to glyphosate-resistant weeds. So now they're going back to using paraquat. But coming back to PD, we know that humans, and especially people living in agricultural regions, encounter more than one pesticide in their lifetime. So we know that pesticides aren't applied in isolation. So when we consider what pesticides might contribute to Parkinson's, and again, we know that just living near the farms is alone related to an increased risk. We really wanted to step back and look at what as a whole was in the environment and maybe contributing to PD in these communities. So to do this, the first question that we had, the first question we really needed to know was how many pesticides are even used in agriculture. What you can see on the graph here is the number of different pesticides that are applied within 500 meters of at least one of the patients in our study population since 1974. So in total, 1,355 different pesticides were applied near the homes of the patients in our study population. And you can see for the past 20 years or so, 500 to 600 are applied per year, at least in this study region, again, in the agricultural regions. So we know some pesticides like paraquat are likely very important for PD, but with hundreds are being applied. So we again decided to step back and say there may be other pesticides that are related to Parkinson's disease besides paraquat that we don't really know about yet. So we decided to actually examine as many of them as possible. So we did what's known as an untargeted scan in order to find the exposures that were most strongly related to PD in our population. So these would be the pesticides that had significantly higher pounds applied near the homes of our patients relative to the non-PD controls that we were comparing them to, which we can then target these pesticides for further research. So what we found from this untargeted scan was that there were 78 different pesticides that were statistically significantly associated with PD. And these, again, had all replicated. So we found them in 2 populations of patients, almost 1,200 patients now, all recruited some 10 years apart. Again, someone mentioned glyphosate, and the research on glyphosate in PD is mixed. There's some studies that show there's no associations, others that are showing maybe something is going on. I can say glyphosate is on that list, so we are seeing that it's applied at higher amounts, at least in our study. One of the things that we do look at is that glyphosate is very, very widely used. So when they apply glyphosate, they're also likely applying things like paraquat and other toxic pesticides. So it's hard right now to say, is it the glyphosate, or is it because it's co-applied with other pesticides? But we do see it linked to PD. So no one had actually ever really done an analysis like this untargeted scan of pesticide exposures. So many of the pesticides that are on that big list there are actually new associations because no other epidemiologic studies have the data or have looked at them. But we did replicate 5 to 10, so that helps provide a stronger case for these pesticides as well, that they may be linked to Parkinson's, including one that I'm going to highlight named trifluralin. So trifluralin was associated with PD in a study of pesticide applicators, known as the Agricultural Health Study as well. Now, at the same time that we were doing this, we had collaborators who were actually interested in identifying agents that were toxic to dopamine neurons. So those are the neurons that are lost in Parkinson's disease. So they were interested in finding agents that actually killed these dopamine neurons, potentially killed them in Parkinson's patients. So they're all pictured here, Lee Rubin, Rich Krolsky, Vic Rana, and Edinson Marino. And what they're actually able to do is grow dopamine neurons in a dish. These are derived from PD patient stem cells. So they can then grow them in their dish and expose them to different agents to see if whatever they expose them to is going to kill the neuron or not. So Rich Krolsky here, second in the middle, actually built a library and tested all of the pesticides, those that we had associated with PD in our epidemiologic study for neurotoxicity, specifically to these dopaminergic dopamine neurons. So overall, what he found was that just about 25% of the associated pesticides were actually directly toxic to the neurons. So that means exposure to 25% of the pesticides killed a substantial amount of neurons in the dish. Now what you can see in the image on the top here is what the neurons look like that they're able to grow in the dish, this time with no exposure. Now what you see now on the bottom is what happens when they exposed the neurons to one of the neurotoxic pesticides, propagate. So you can see all of the axons, or kind of the little tails of the neurons, the long stringy things in the top, have disappeared. And that's because the neurons have died. So overall, 25% of the pesticides that we associated were also showing neurotoxicity. So we had a series of individual pesticides that we linked to PD in our epidemiology studies, and that we're also showing, many of them also showed the neurotoxicity. But again, I'm going to come back to this concept that people aren't exposed to a single pesticide in their lifetime. None of us are. They encounter many. So what we wanted to then assess was that maybe combinations of pesticides that people have co-exposure to are going to be more toxic than individual pesticides. And these might contribute more strongly to PD. So the first thing that we did was go back to our patient populations and did what's known as a correlation analysis to see if there were groups of pesticides that people had exposure to more commonly. So this means if a participant was exposed to one pesticide in the cluster, they probably also had exposure to the other pesticides in the cluster as well. So what you can see on the right is what's known as a correlation heat map. So the red boxes in this correlation heat map show pesticides that strongly clustered together, meaning their exposures were correlated and you likely had co-exposure to that cluster. Then the figure on the left is what's known as a dendrogram. So this is actually just another visual representation of the same correlations. So there is one cluster that we decided to focus on. We decided to focus on it because it contained many of the most strongly associated pesticides that we had picked up in the epidemiology. But it's also a cluster of pesticides that are almost exclusively applied on cotton. So it really strongly implicated living near cotton agriculture with this cluster. So we dubbed it the cotton cluster. Now, Rich and our stem cell biologist colleagues then took this cluster of pesticides that we knew the patients in our population had co-exposure to. And he tested them all again for neurotoxicity in his stem cell models. So he tested all possible co-exposure combinations for the pesticides, which was about 7 or 8 in that cluster for toxicity. Now, on the graph on the right here, the height of the bar represents the number of surviving neurons for that co-exposure combination. So the darker the color represents more toxic co-exposure combinations. So what he found was that combinations of co-exposure involving this pesticide that I mentioned, trifluralin, which are shown with the gold bar down there at the bottom, caused the most neuron cell death. And there was potential synergy with the pesticide known as tribufos, as this pairwise co-exposure alone caused a 65% reduction in the surviving neurons in his models. Now, trifluralin is that pesticide that I mentioned before. It has already been associated with Parkinson's disease in the study of agricultural workers and pesticide applicators in the agricultural health study. And to this day, it's one of the most widely used pesticides in California, which we see with the PUR. It's in the top 10 by use, and I'm sure that translates to the rest of the country as well. So to recap, we have associated this cluster with PD epidemiologically in our patient study, they're all commonly co-applied on cotton. And then Rich demonstrated strong neurotoxicity for co-exposure combinations involving trifluralin. So we have some very, So we have some very clear epidemiologic data that in the Central Valley of California, PD patients are much more likely to have higher levels of exposure to pesticides than age-similar residents who don't develop PD. But still, Parkinson's is a somewhat rare disorder. And getting at one of the questions that we had earlier, we know that even most people who are exposed to pesticides aren't going to develop Parkinson's. So we need to come back to the other component, the other likely component, genetics and biology, and kind of what's going on in our systems, and ask, are there factors, genetic factors, which are going to make people more susceptible to developing Parkinson's with pesticide exposure? So one of the first targets that we decided to focus on was a gene known as PON1. Now, PON1, the gene, encodes a protein that is also known as PON1, or paraoxinase. Now, this protein, this enzyme, is responsible for metabolizing organophosphate pesticide exposures. So it turns out that there are genetic variants which in part determine how fast our bodies are going to metabolize OPs after exposure, or kind of detoxify the OPs. Other genetic variants are linked to very fast metabolizing. So if our bodies are slow to metabolize the pesticides, then our cells are exposed to these toxic agents for a much longer period of time. Now, what we found, Now, what we found in our PEG study was that for these, for 3 commonly used OP pesticides, living near agricultural applications, so again, this kind of ambient drift from the fields to these 3 pesticides, was actually not associated with PD in people who were very fast PON1 metabolizers. But among people who were slow PON1 metabolizers, exposure to the OP pesticides was related to 2 to 3 times the risk of PD. Now, this was our ambient exposure measure. Again, we've talked about it, living near the fields, living near the agriculture where they're applying these specific organophosphate pesticides. But if these exposures are true, we would also expect to see the same thing with other routes of OP exposure. Now, at the time we were doing these studies, OPs were very commonly used. They were used in common household products that probably many of us have used. I know my family used them. So we would expect to see similar things with these other routes of OP exposures. So we looked at household products that contained these same OP pesticides, and again, we saw the same thing, where slow metabolizers of these OP pesticides were at the highest risk of PD. Now, I do want to say, thankfully now, while OPs are still legal to use in agriculture for the most part, they are banned in our household products. So that's one thing we've been able to do. So we also follow all of our patients, or as many as possible, to assess symptom progression over time. And on average for our patients for over 5 years. So we further found that organophosphate pesticide exposure in this group of people who are slow PON1 metabolizers was also related to faster motor and cognitive symptom decline. Now, the dopamine transporter gene was another target that we had. So DAT from this gene is responsible for the reuptake of dopamine in our neurons, so in our brain. So in PD patients, before they begin taking medication, DAT levels are generally greatly reduced. In 2006, Collada first reported a potential combined effect of DAT genetic variability and pesticide exposure, this time paraquat. So their this is called a gene environment interaction analysis, and it was prompted by the hypothesis that DAT proteins selectively let certain neurotoxicants into our neurons. And there's evidence to support this actually with MPTP. So the authors found this, and they came to Beata and asked to see if we saw the same type trend in our PEG population. Lo and behold, we did. We saw the same trend, where people with certain genetic variation that influences the ability of DAT to allow dopamine back into our neurons when they're exposed to pesticides have over 4 times, paraquat in this case, have over 4 times the risk of Parkinson's. So this replicated in both of these 2 studies. Now, we've also examined the HLA genes. So large genetic studies, or GWAS, have found that variants in a gene known as HLA-DRA increase the risk somewhat of PD. So this gene is involved in our immune system, and it links immune responses to PD. So what we found was that people who had this risk variant, patients who had this risk variant, had altered immune activity. And furthermore, people with this genotype had 2.5 times the risk of PD when exposed to the pyrethroid class of pesticides, which are known to influence immune activity. So these findings suggest that PD patients that might have a more pro-inflammatory response when they're exposed to certain environmental exposures like pesticides and pyrethroids that may contribute to that increased risk and susceptibility specifically in the patients. Now, finally, with Tim Greenemeyer's group, we have also looked at DNA repair gene mechanisms. So mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress, Dr. Dorsey talked a little bit about mitochondrial dysfunction and how that's responsible for the energy of our cells. They are very strongly linked mechanisms as ways that might lead to neuron death in PD, and they have been for quite some time now. So both of these two mechanisms, mitochondrial dysfunction and oxidative stress, these toxic mechanisms, can both cause and result in what's known as DNA damage. So our bodies have natural ways to defend against this, to protect against it, with our DNA repair pathways. So what we found here was that among people who had genetic variants which may lessen our body's natural defense against DNA damage, people who had high exposure to pesticides that are actually already known to inhibit the mitochondria and cause oxidative stress, these two toxic mechanisms linked here, including paraquat, by the way, was related to over a 2.5-fold increase in the risk of PD. So overall, from these genetic studies that we've done over the past decade, we've linked several pesticide exposures and PDs to genes that may be involved in biologic pathways that the pesticides influence. So these are actually not PD genes that you would see in a GWAS or a big genetic study of PD. And these are not genes that might, you wouldn't have any increase in the risk of PD if you didn't have an environmental exposure. They make you just more susceptible to the environmental exposure. So we've highlighted membrane transporters as potentially important, so how the pesticides enter our cells, DNA repair genes and those natural defense mechanisms, so the pesticides have been shown to kind of damage DNA, so, and then further the immune functions as well. Now, some of our latest work is utilizing new technologies that allow us to measure thousands to even hundreds of thousands of different biologic markers in samples that we take, like blood from the patients. So we can step back and say that we had some hypotheses, some targets on what might be vulnerabilities that would lead to increased susceptibility to Parkinson's exposure, but we may not know where all these vulnerabilities are. So we can step back with a large enough population and actually compare all of the markers among patients with and without pesticide exposure to find the ones that are most different and the biologic pathways that are most susceptible and may have been on that kind of causal chain from pesticide exposure to PD. So we very recently did a more untargeted genetic analysis like this using what's known as genetic sequencing. So we get the whole DNA area for genes are measured. So what we found from this was among all the genes that we looked at, which was 70, the patients who had high levels of exposure to this cotton cluster that I mentioned that was very neurotoxic and very strongly related to an increased risk of PD in our patients, they also had high levels of genetic variation in what's known as lysosomal genes. So lysosomes are basically the garbage collection system of our cells. And we know that misfolded alpha-synuclein, which is what goes into the Lewy bodies, is supposed to be handled and cleared by lysosomal systems. So what we saw was that variants in genes associated with this lysosomal function, and notably something that's called autophagy, were enriched in PD patients who were exposed to these agricultural pesticides. So it suggests that altered lysosomal function may be one of the underlying susceptibilities that leads to developing PD in the pesticide exposed. So we just talked about genetics, but we're also currently doing this type of untargeted analysis in what's known as metabolomics. So metabolomics is actually the study of small molecules that are commonly known as metabolites. Now, these are the end products of all of our cells' metabolism. So all those reactions that happen to make our cells keep going and our body's processing. These metabolites are the end products of that. So we measured the metabolome, which is all of these metabolites that we could in the serum, which is part of the blood in PD patients, and the non-PD controls. And we wanted to see if there were metabolites or metabolite pathways that were disrupted, specifically among the patients with high levels of pesticide exposure. So the idea with the questions that we're trying to answer here is, are there disrupted metabolic pathways we find specifically among pesticide-exposed patients relative to unexposed patients? So the goal is then to shed light on these exposure-related disease pathways, the pathways that may have been involved in causing Parkinson's in the exposed. So we're going to come back to that cotton cluster, which we had already picked out as related to PD, which also showed neurotoxicity to those dopamine neurons. So we did what is known as a metabolome-wide association study. So we tested over 3,000 different metabolites to find if they were related to high pesticide exposure to this cotton cluster in the Parkinson's patients. Now, overall, we found that 264 were. So 264 of these metabolites were significantly associated with exposure to this cotton cluster. Now, interestingly, most of the metabolites were only associated with exposure among the patients. So of these 264, only 10 were also related to exposure among the controls. So that means for the rest of these, at least potentially from this study, they're likely exposure and disease-related metabolites. So these could give us a clue of that pathway of what caused disease in the patients specifically, as they were unrelated to pesticide exposure in people who did not have Parkinson's. So there were a number of interesting individual metabolites that we associated. So we found that the patients with high exposure to the cotton cluster pesticides had significantly higher levels of a number of lipids, specifically some known as sphingolipids. So sphingolipids, and Dr. Dorsey mentioned I might talk about this, so I'm glad he did, they've already been quite strongly implicated in PD with the GBA gene. Now, I don't know, many of you may have heard, some of you, GBA was identified in the large genetic studies, the GWAS, as some of the most important genetic risk factors for PD. So this GBA gene encodes a protein known as GCase, and what does that protein do? It's involved with sphingolipid metabolism. So we picked out these sphingolipids that are linking GBA to pesticide exposure in the patients. But several other striking results came from what is known as a pathway analysis. So here is where we, instead of looking for individual metabolites, we looked at pathways that were disrupted in the patients who had high levels of pesticide exposure. And that's what this graph shows, all the very, very little text, which don't worry, don't try to read, is basically just saying that there were many pathways that were disrupted in patients who had high levels of exposure. And this is relative to patients who had low levels of exposure, who likely had a different route of developing PD. So notably, one of the top pathways that we picked up, the most statistically significant pathway, was known as atrazine degradation. Now, atrazine is actually an herbicide. So this is a pesticide, and the top pathway that we picked up was a known pesticide degradation pathway. So that was very validating of our analysis and our results. The other pathway that immediately jumped out was the mitochondrial transport electron chain. So Dr. Dorsey mentioned it. His hypothesis is that most of these exposures are going to go through this pathway. It's been really strongly implicated, again, as a key mechanism in neuron death in Parkinson's patients now for quite some time. So interestingly, without knowing kind of any of this information and analysis results that I had, our basic science collaborators had also been asking the question of what makes exposure to this cotton cluster, to trifluralin, that pesticide, so neurotoxic, which was, again, it was seemingly driven by this one pesticide, trifluralin. So they had also, again, hypothesized mitochondrial dysfunction. So Edinson here ran a series of additional experiments, and what he found was that exposure to this pesticide resulted in a 50% reduction in mitochondrial activity compared to the exposed. So these pesticides were greatly influencing, inhibiting the mitochondria. So both our kind of untargeted metabolite analysis in the epidemiology, as well as these now very targeted, specific, detailed experiments that they did, implicated mitochondrial dysfunction with exposure to this cotton cluster of pesticides. But again, coming back to this graph, mitochondrial function was one of a number of pathways that were disrupted in PD patients with high exposure relative to patients without exposure. So again, lipid metabolism, like we talked about with GBA and those sphingolipids, oxidative stress, which was another one of those mechanisms that we know can lead to neuron death, glutathione pathways, which are very important in neuronal communication in our brain, as well as the urea cycle, and several others that I've highlighted here, and I've highlighted them because there is research already implicating these in PD pathogenesis. So mitochondrial dysfunction seems to be one piece of the story linking how exposure can lead to disease, exposure to these cotton cluster pesticides, but it may not be the only one. So it's again likely a very complicated interplay of exposure leading to disrupted systems, and a cascade of events that leads to disease. Now, we've also looked at how pesticide exposure is related to what's known as methylation. So these are changes that happen to our genome, and they actually help turn on and off our genes. So act or don't act, depending on what your cells need. Now, what we found is that exposure to these organophosphates was related to methylation changes, specifically in pathways that are known as acetylcholine receptor pathways. So this is actually significant because OP pesticides are designed, they are engineered to influence acetylcholine pathways. That is how they are designed to be neurotoxic to pests, all the way up to sarin gas in humans. What this research is showing is that even at these low levels that are supposedly safe, long-term exposure, chronic exposure to OPs disrupts these pathways that we know are neurotoxic. They're designed to act on these neurotoxic pathways. And we could actually detect this in our PD patients with the methylation. So finally, we also looked to see if the PD-associated pesticides that were associated with PD onset, with developing the disease, were also related to our longitudinally measured symptom decline. So we did find that higher exposure, and this is in the decades prior to diagnosis, to 10 pesticides was related to faster motor, mood, or cognitive decline, and they're highlighted in the summary figure here. So this included several pesticides that are part of that cotton cluster that I mentioned, including tribufos, which was one of the ones that showed the synergy in the dopamine neurotoxicity. And then two other pesticides that I want to highlight that also popped up as neurotoxic in the stem cell models, including copper sulfate and propagate. And I'll highlight copper sulfate because this is one of the newer pesticides where the use is actually increasing now. Many of these older pesticides, they're still used, but other than paraquat, their use is going down as newer pesticides are created. But copper sulfate is increasing currently in use. So we also have epidemiologic evidence implicating several of these specific chemicals in not only PD onset, but also in faster symptom progression. Now, finally, our current study wave, there's a question about this, is actually focused on continuing this research, but also researching the gut-brain axis. So how is the microbiome involved in PD and potentially pesticide exposure? So our current recruitment phase wraps up at the end of this year. So I did just want to point it out as we don't have results from it yet, but say look out for more in the gut-brain axis and microbiome. And environmental exposures coming soon. Now finally, I did want to wrap up with what this means for not only understanding what causes PD, and then hopefully understanding how we can stop it, how we can halt it, but also what can we do to prevent it. So for this, a strong scientific story is important for regulatory standard setting and public policy. But advocacy, as Dr. Dorsey talked about, is just as important. So one thing that many people who research pesticides or who know about pesticides, live in communities that are affected by pesticides, are calling for is something that's called pesticidovigilance. So this is a term that was coined by Milner and Boyd, and it's a play on the term pharmaceutical vigilance. So it is basically asking the government, baseline just asking the government to regulate pesticides like we regulate other things already, like pharmaceuticals. So conduct continued long-term safety monitoring for pesticides, just like the drug companies are already required to do for the medications that we take. So some of the success stories, though, I want to highlight those, of course, that have happened with the help of patient advocacy, include the California Parkinson's Disease Registry Act. So there are many, many groups that deserve praise for this, but Mark Siegel, who is pictured here, a PD patient, he was actually the first advocate, and a very strong advocate, for the PD registry in California. Now, the bill that mandated this registry did actually pass in 2004. So you can see a group of advocates here, including patients and scientists in this case, they had to further lobby to actually get funding to support this registry. So this is pictured in 2015. They were successful. The funding bill ended up being passed in 2017, and California is actually now expanding the registry to include other Lewy body diseases as well as Alzheimer's disease. So this is actually a really big deal. It's very new, but our understanding of Parkinson's in the community is going to grow leaps and bounds because of things like this. Now, you may have heard of this in May. The US Senate also unanimously passed the National Plan to End Parkinson's. So President Biden signed this act into law in July. So this was really thanks to thousands and thousands within the Parkinson's community, along with the Michael J. Fox Foundation, lobbying, contacting their congressional representatives to help get this through Congress. So this bill, if you weren't aware, was actually designed after a bill that passed for Alzheimer's. So this Alzheimer's bill passed now, 15, 20 years ago, and it led to huge increases in federal funding for dementia care and research. So many people actually credit the passing of the Alzheimer's bill with supporting the research that eventually led to the first disease-altering medications in Alzheimer's that have just hit the market in the past few years. So the Parkinson's bill has the potential to do the same thing, to dramatically increase the research funding with the goal of developing more effective pathways and treatments and cures for PD. As well as improving early diagnosis and treatments and disparities in treatments that we have. So finally, in case you are interested in getting involved in advocacy, I know the Parkinson's Association probably has some great links too. I wanted to point you out to the Michael J. Fox Foundation. It's a really great place to start because I've met with my congressional offices now several times over the past 10 years to advocate for Parkinson's. So this has all been facilitated by the Fox Foundation. Now they also have a link on their website for getting involved in research if you're at all interested in that, including some very short online only studies. So you can check all of those out on their website under the Take Action tab. But I will leave it at that today. Acknowledge all of my really incredible colleagues and research trainees and funders, but most importantly, the patients who are involved in our studies who make all of this work possible. So thank you very much for having me today for the Parkinson's Association. It's good to see you. Oh, of course. Yeah, of course. Oh, we're out of time. Okay, okay.
So thank you so much, Dr. Paul. We are out of time for questions, but she is able to stay for a few minutes before she has to run and catch her flight. So if you do have questions specifically for Dr. Paul, you can ask her when we break, which will be very momentarily. We have our next energized break of the day, and then we're heading into lunch. So if you're starving, bear with us for 10 minutes. So I want to welcome Angela Halpern. Angela is a distinguished expert in voice and speech disorders, is passionate about empowering individuals with Parkinson's disease to regain their sense of self through improved communication. With over 32 years of experience as a speech-language pathologist, she currently serves as a faculty instructor and the chief clinical officer for LSVT Global, and she serves on the Parkinson Association of the Rockies board. Ms. Halpern has been deeply moved by the life-changing impact that LSVT Loud speech therapy can have on individual lives and is dedicated to enabling access to these treatments for people with PD globally. PAR offers several weekly classes to continue practicing your loud techniques after completing the LSVT certification. You can contact our offices for more information. Let's welcome Angela.
Thank you. I am so excited to be here with all of you. So you have been listening to some wonderful, wonderful lectures this morning, but you have not been using your voices as you've been listening. So we want to get those voices revved up so when you see people to talk to at lunch, you can be heard and understood. I've had the privilege of talking with many of you who have stopped by today, but if you're not familiar with LSVT Loud, it's an evidence-based speech therapy designed specifically for people with Parkinson's disease. So it's unique in that, and it has over 30 years of research. I'm just going to do a few little exercises with you here before you go to lunch. If you did the therapy, you would do a whole hour of voice exercise. So everyone get a little sip of your water. It's good to stay hydrated. And the first exercise we're going to start is an ah. This is designed to be a little bit of a weightlifting for your voice to keep your voice strong. So I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to have you do what I do. Ah. Now you're going to, you guys are going to do that, and you're going to hold it out. I want nice, loud voices. Okay, here we go. Keep it loud. Keep it going. Keep going. Keep loud. Louder, louder, louder. Keep it going. Woo! Excellent. Good. Good start. So for this next one, I'm going to do it for about 15 seconds. If you run out of air, just catch your breath and go again. With this therapy, we're always getting healthy vocal loudness. It's never a yell or a scream. You guys sound great. Here we go with number 2. Good. A little bit louder. Bump it up. Super. I like it. Keep it going. Whoa, we had a lot of 15 seconds in there. In therapy, you would do this as long as you could, but we're just keeping it short for purposes of practice. We're going to do a couple more. Now, as you do this, feel this voice. This is the voice I want you to use all the time when you talk the rest of today. Here we go. Good. Keep it loud. Feel that effort. Feel that effort. Good. Loud, loud, loud. Okay, very nice. All right, we're going to do one more. Okay, you got it in you? Here we go. Super. I like it. That voice will help you be heard. Keep it going. Okay, excellent. So the goal of therapy is not that you're going to walk around and go, ah. The goal is that we strengthen your voice and speech so that then when you talk to someone, you can use that same voice. In therapy, I would have you come up with things that are personal to you, that you say every day, But for purposes of practice today, let's think of some things you may say to greet each other after this session. So I want you to use that same effort, same loudness, and I'm going to say a phrase, have you repeat it nice and loud. Okay, here we go. How are you? How are you? Good. Let's do that one again. That sounded great. How are you? Excellent. So now I'm going to have you say, my name is, and fill in your name in that same loud voice. Go ahead. My name is. Okay, so when you meet someone walking around, that's the loudness I want you to hear. All right, let's do this one. This is a fantastic event. This is a fantastic event. Woo, you stayed loud the whole time. I love it. I'm having a great time. Okay, so when you get out of here, this is going to be your task to walk around, use that voice as you talk to people. Okay, so for some of you, and I know I've had this question at my table today, raise your hand if using this voice I'm asking you to use feels too loud to you. Yep, lots of hands, and that's very normal. In Parkinson's, there's a mismatch. In that, when we ask someone to get to a voice that's normal loudness, it feels too loud. It feels like you're shouting. So a big part of what we do in therapy is help you see that voice is just normal loudness. It's not too loud. Have any of you asked your spouse to go get their hearing checked? Yep, I've heard that a lot too. And then you might discover, oh, actually my voice has gotten a little quiet. So again, we only get you to normal loudness, not too loud. Okay, we're going to do a little friendly competition to round out today. So I think our dividing line will be right here on the podium. When I point to this side, I want you to say think. When I point to this side, I want you to say loud. So let's see which side wins. Okay, here we go. Think loud. Ooh, you guys may have to rev it up a bit. Here we go. Think loud. Good. Think loud. Think loud. Love it. Nice. Okay, we're just going to wrap up with a few more phrases in those good loud voices. One of the things my patients say to me the most is that when they get this voice that can be heard and understood, they feel empowered. They feel more confident. They feel like a part of the conversation. So I'm going to start with B. When I do this, I want you to say empowered. Okay, here we go. B. Empowered. B. Empowered. B. Empowered. Okay, and now we're going to do it with confident. B. Empowered. B. Empowered. And you guys will say confident. B. Confident. There we go. B. Confident. B. Confident. Good. So getting that normal loudness voice will help you be empowered and confident because you can be heard and understood. So to finish, it's going to be heard. Here we go. Be. Heard. Be. Heard. And then let's do be loud. Be. Loud. Be. Loud. Excellent. Good. All right. So with those voices, go forth, get some food, and speak to everyone in your good loud voice.
I'm competitive, but I feel like this side had more people. So anyway, we are heading off to lunch. Just as a reminder, if you have a mobility restriction, please raise your orange ticket. We will come help you. And this is your opportunity to go talk to the many partners that we have out there, get more information. We will be starting up again at 1 o'clock, so make sure you are here in your seats at 1. Thank you.
Don't you feel it growing day by day? People getting ready for the move. Some are happy, some are sad. Oh, we gotta let the music play. and the seed may burn. I'm learning to fly.
Okay. Can we all take a seat, and we're going to get started again. We're doing a great job of staying on track, so I appreciate everybody being back in here at 1 o'clock. I also want to remind everybody that parking is free. If you have to leave early, you'll have to hit the microphone that's at the gate to leave and let them know that you were part of this event, and they will raise the gate for you. But the gates will be up in the garage when you leave after the event. So I hope everyone enjoyed lunch. I am very grateful to be with all of you here today, and we just keep growing this conference, and it is absolutely amazing. PAR continues to expand our programs and services throughout Colorado and Wyoming. We now support over 80 plus weekly exercise classes and 60 plus support groups every month. We've hosted 19 in-person educational seminars already in 2024, and we have a few more before year end. We've also put on a Care Partner Summit and now this conference. So we've been very busy this year. We already have our dates set for our 2 conferences in 2025, so get them on your calendar. Our 7th annual Care Partner Summit will be held on May 10th at the Hyatt Regency Aurora, and E3 will be May 20th back here in DTC. For more information on these events, you can visit our PAR table in the exhibitor area. You can go to our website. There's also a Save the Date page in the program. And lastly, I'd like to thank our E3 Conference Committee members for putting on a remarkable conference. They always keep the conference fresh and provide invaluable insight into what our community is looking for. So thank you to Angela Halpern, Cynthia Mihal, Jane Phillips, Aaron Van Poel, and Kent Willman. In addition, I would like to thank the PAR staff. Yes, give them all a big round of applause. I'd like to thank the PAR staff, especially Melissa Romsdell, our program coordinator, for all the work they do to make this day as seamless as possible. At least to me, I haven't heard of any incidents, so that's all good. And they also offering the valuable information that they provide for you today. So give a big round of applause for the PAR staff. All right, Shadevan, are you mic'd up? Are we good? Okay. So for our third Energized Break of the Day, I want to welcome Shadevan Brown, also known as Hot Dog, which is what I prefer, who will be leading us in a Power Punch demonstration. Hot Dog has instructed Power Punch boxing classes for PAR since 2016. He started boxing at 18 and was a contender at the Olympic trials at 20. Hot Dog is a 4-time Golden Gloves winner, 4-time regional Golden Gloves winner, and has had 4 national Golden Glove appearances. He was 3rd in the nation in 1996. You can attend his classes on Wednesdays at 9:30 a.m. and Saturdays at 9 a.m. at the Denver Red Shield. Give a warm welcome to Hot Dog.
Oh, am I on? Oh. Hello, everyone. I don't like to be up here because it's not about me. It's about everyone that's has this terrible disease, and I'm proud to be a part of it. And if I have a few students that would like to come up here. Anyone? Just to do like this, just to demonstrate what we do here and there. Huh? Hey, I'm willing for everybody to come. And I can have anyone out there, whoever, anyone ever boxed before or thought about boxing or ever watched boxing, would like to come up here. I don't have my mitts, so I'm kind of sensitive. So don't kill my hands. How you doing? I think I know you.
I'm Paul.
Have I saw you before?
Probably.
Maybe.
I'm everywhere.
Me too. I'm everywhere as well. Be careful for that. Yeah. Okay, so what we do is just like basic boxing skills. We start from ground zero. If you boxed before, like I said before, then it'll be much easier. If you have not, then we got to start from zero, of course. All right, have you ever did anything like this?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Besides a street fight?
I've never hit anybody. But I do mitts. I do actually do mitts with people at the Fort Collins Power Punch class.
Okay, that's going good. All right, so you know the basics.
Yeah.
What hand are you, left or right-handed?
Right.
Right-handed. Okay. Are you ready? Yeah. All right, you're going to throw a jab. Throw another jab. Throw it right. There you go. So throw 1, 2. 1, 2. Keep your hands up from right here. Don't throw it down. So just throw it straight across your body. 2. Double 2. There you go. Nice. 2, 3. 2, 3. There you go. See, this right here is like the basic thing that we do. Like I said, if it wasn't for everyone here, I wouldn't be here. And like I said, I'm just excited to be here with everyone. And I haven't seen a few people that I haven't seen in years that came up to me, which I'm like elated to see. Anyway, so I have 2 young women here. Me too. All right, we're gonna do the same thing. All right, so now like for things that we do, like people have different, different skill sets. So for
Jackie.
I know. For Jackie, her balance is kind of off a little bit, so I don't like her to throw like really hard punches because she'll fall backwards.
Mm-hmm.
So, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Are you gonna try? Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Bring it on.
All right. So with Jackie, we try to just make everything just kind of comfortable for her. So, all right, ready? Thumbs up. All right, ready? Hooks. So we just throwing hooks, basic hooks. Don't throw it out. Time. I don't want her to fall backwards. She want to get too excited, and I don't want her to fall backwards.
Now it's Jane's turn.
I can't catch her. I just have to do a procedure myself, so I'm a little out of it here and there. Okay, what's your name?
Jane.
Jane. All right.
You
Hi.
know that.
They don't.
Okay.
Okay, so. Are you gonna come up here? No? See, she's just as shy as I am. All right, so ready? We're gonna do the same thing. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Slip 3, 2.
Yeah.
Do it again. 1, 2, 3. Slip 3, 2. Slip 2, 3.
2, 3. Excellent.
All right, 1, 2, 3. Slip 2, 3. Slip 3, 2. Slip 2, 3. Roll 3, 2. Double. So when I do like combinations like that, I do it like really fast just so they can like work on their mindset as well as mine, because I still like mess up a lot on combinations. So we all work with each other still. So, is that all everyone need from me?
He's the best.
Thank you, Paul. Paul, thank you, sir. Good to meet you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so that was a great demonstration, and I promise you that when you go to a non-contact boxing class, which we call Power Punch, you will be taught the fundamentals. So don't worry, no one's going to expect you to do a slip and a duck like Jane just did. You'll actually be taught the fundamentals, how to do your stance, what the different punches are, and they take it very slow until you're ready to get up there and do submit. So it's a really fun class. The great thing about non-contact boxing is it works cognitive, your core, your balance, and your strength. So it's a wonderful exercise for people. And remember, all of our classes are free for the person with Parkinson's and their care partner. So with that said, We could not have this event without sponsorship from our lovely partners. So I'd like to welcome them up here to the podium to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. Thanks, Jody, and thanks, Par, for having us out here today. This is my, I think, fourth E3 so far, and it just keeps getting better. So I think I had a chance to talk to a good amount of you guys so far, but I'm with Supernus Pharmaceuticals. I'm the Colorado and Utah rep, so we're out here talking with you guys, and I spend all of my time trying to talk to your neurologist. The one big thing that we take back to them is we get to these events and we are able to talk to you guys, and so many of you are like, why hasn't my doctor told me about this? My job is to inform them of those things, and I try really hard to do that. So I do appreciate if you guys stop by, take some literature back to them just to see if maybe a medication might be an option for you, either now or in the future. We have two separate medications that we, tend to talk about at these events. One of them is Apokyn, and that's a really cool subcutaneous injection to reverse off time. We like to think of it as similar to like a insulin medication. The other medication is an oral medication once a day. The cool part about that one, it's the only medication that's indicated to treat dyskinesia. So we are really trying to get that, literature in your hands and into the doctor's hands, just to see if it's an option for you. So if you do have a second, please stop by. We can talk about some things, and we appreciate you guys coming out here and meeting with us and supporting PAR. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. My name is Glenn Gillen, and I am one of the representatives here today with Boston Scientific. The other is John Campbell, whom many of you have probably spoken with. I have been responsible for our augmented reality kind of dive into specific patient anatomy of the brain in this back room. So if you've heard a buzz about that, we would love to talk to you about it. We have, at Boston Scientific, developed with the most advanced neurosurgery planning software on the planet, the ability to create a virtual model of every single patient's brain that's precise down to a fraction of a millimeter. So we've been exploring some of those brains in the back. And with deep brain stimulation, we are excited to help you and your caregivers on your own journey, basically, any patient with Parkinson's disease. So if this is something that you would like to speak with us more about, definitely get our information. We've also had quite a few support groups sign up to have this incredible innovation brought to the support group and kind of discussed and seen further there, which we could not be more excited to share with you for. As always, thank you so much to Jody and Seth and the rest of the team that have put this incredible event on and all the events that they put on every year. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Boston Scientific is happy to support you all in every way that we can, and it's been a pleasure getting to know everybody I've gotten to know today. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lenore, and I am with Encompass Health Rehabilitation Hospital. I have spoken to quite a few of you today. We are Joint Commission certified in Parkinson's with Parkinson's-specific rehab programs and support groups, everything from neurology rounding to family support groups to medication timing. A lot of our patients come not just on the first onset, but also if they need a little tune-up, we say. If there's medication changes or a fall, we can admit either from home or from the acute care setting. But we are so grateful to be a part of Parkinson's of the Rockies and meeting everybody here today. And if you need any information, we are located in Littleton, and we provide transportation for all our patients to and from the hospital as well, accepting most major insurances except for Kaiser. So hopefully you can stop by, get some treats. We still have some more of those medication containers and lots of granola bars and candy. So we're at the treat table. All right, you guys, thank you all.
Hi, good afternoon. It is a pleasure to serve and support you. My name is Lonnie Martinez. I'm the CEO at Reunion Inverness Hospital, and I'm also a proud board member here on the PAR Association, or Parkinson's Association board. So thank you for allowing me to serve you and support you. Our hospital is very proud of the care we provide to Parkinson's patients. In fact, we are recognized by the World Association of Parkinson's as the premier place to provide rehabilitation services for folks with Parkinson's. We also have a full complement of neurologists, medical providers, and our nursing team is extraordinary. In fact, we're fully staffed. I don't think there's any hospital in Colorado that would be able to say that. So we're really proud of that hospital. And our number one metric, our key performance indicator, is to get patients home. We far outpace the benchmark. We average about 85% of our patients actually go home. Benchmark would be about 72%. So anyhow, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you again to PAR and our team here. They've done an amazing job. Jody, Seth, thank you.
Hello, hi, I'm Cindy Kirkendall. I'm the Senior Territory Manager for Abbott Brain Therapies, working in the deep brain stimulation space. I know many of the faces out in the audience today, and I'm excited to be part of the program. Again, want to thank Jody, Seth, the team for putting on such an amazing event that so many people are benefiting from. Myself, my team, we support Colorado and Wyoming, all the movement disorder centers that offer deep brain stimulation for treatment of Parkinson's disease. And I'm sure most of you are very familiar with DBS, but if there's anybody new to Parkinson's here today, DBS is a pacemaker technology. It's a surgical implant that can be very, very beneficial if you're at a point in the disease where your medications are no longer managing your symptoms or you're having side effects from your medications. And with Abbott, when you're thinking about therapy now, it's not just do you want to have surgery, but there's a lot of options and choices. There's 3 companies now manufacturing DBS implants, so there's a lot of new technology with regards to the implant. Very excited about some of the new changes with Abbott. They were the first on the market with directional stimulation, so now we can steer the stimulation in the brain, providing better outcomes with less side effects. We also recently launched Neurosphere Virtual Clinic, so you can actually access your physician from remote areas, whether it be your home, on vacation, actually have your DBS system programmed remotely over Wi-Fi, so no longer do you have to make the trips to your physician's office to see them for adjustments. And Abbott just earlier this year launched a new rechargeable platform called Liberta, and it is the smallest implanted DBS pulse generator on the market with the longest interval between recharges. So you can now go 37 days between charging your device, which is making living with DBS a lot easier for people. So the things that you'll see from Abbott are really improvements for people that are living with the device, making it easier, more manageable with the best outcomes possible. So we're here to educate. If you want to schedule time to meet, we're happy to sit down, but thanks.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Christensen. I'm with a company called AbbVie. I may win the award for traveling the furthest. I live in Omaha, so go Big Red. Probably won't win me many friends here. We have a therapy that's called Duopa. It is a carbidopa-levodopa system that delivers a gel formulation of carbidopa and levodopa through a medication port. It goes directly into your small intestine. It bypasses the stomach. It eliminates the need for pills, oral medication, and the goal is to get a more steady, consistent flow of medicine and get you off kind of the roller coaster and the unpredictable on and off periods that can come when Parkinson's advances. So happy to talk with you, anybody. I've talked with a lot of folks already. Please stop by my table out there to talk about more and see some, grab some information and take home and talk to your doctor about. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I am Kim Searles with Beneficent, and we help families to look at their financial portfolio and figure out how to get your care paid for. We don't do the care, we figure out how to get it paid for, whether non-medical services are needed in the home, or if you need assisted living, full-scale care, memory care, all those services can be very costly. So we can, within an hour, figure out how to get it paid for, as well as, did you know that in the state of Colorado, if we have a husband and a wife situation, the state favors marriage, meaning we can transfer things over to the community spouse and get the person that needs the care, their care paid for. If you're single, we can also take that stress off of you and figure out how to get your care paid for. So I am out there. I'll wait to leave to make sure that I can talk to all of you. But thanks so much for having us today. Again, Kim Searles with Beneficent. Thanks so much.
I'm going to put the microphone up a little bit here. Folks, my name is Brian Wilbur. I'm one of the co-founders of Bingo Reverse Mortgage. We're a local brokerage here in Colorado, and we specialize in only reverse mortgages. Now, I don't want to take too much of your time here, so I will be very brief, but there is still an incredible amount of misinformation out there about reverse mortgages. And if tax-free retirement income is a priority for you, get the facts. We're one of the preferred lenders for PAR, and we'd be happy to answer any of your questions and see if we can add value. Thank you for your time.
Hello, everyone. I'm Doug Reed, an ambassador for the Davis Phinney Foundation. I was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2010. For those of you that are not familiar with the Davis Phinney Foundation, I like to explain it best as the Michael J. Fox Foundation is all about finding a cure for Parkinson's. The Davis Phinney Foundation is all about living your best life possible now, today. One of our most heavily relied on resources is our Every Victory Counts manual. It's free. You can sign up on the website and they'll mail you a copy, or you can download a book. But I've heard this is commonly referred to as the Parkinson's Bible. It's anything and everything you'd want to know about Parkinson's. So go to the website. It's dpf.org for short, if you can't remember the full name of the organization. But you can also go out to YouTube, search for Davis Phinney Foundation, and you can click subscribe, and then all the resources that we post will be available through YouTube as well. Thank you.
Hi there. I'm going to share a few examples of some brand names that have become synonymous with their product categories and entered our vernacular. Things like Kleenex, Band-Aid, Xerox, Tupperware, and I'm sure you can think of many others. There's one more that I think should add to the list, and that's Home Instead. Home Instead is synonymous with providing the highest caliber personal care services to support individuals and families living with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, dementia, and other conditions that otherwise encumber or interfere with our daily lives. Many of you may have attended or been familiar with PAR's annual Care Partners Summit, and Home Instead has provided in-home care for participants of the summit so they can leave their partner at home, knowing and trusting that they're well cared for while they're away attending the summit. Home Instead is a proud partner of the work that PAR does, supporting and providing resources to the Rocky Mountain Parkinson's community. At Home Instead, we are more than just a service provider, we're a trusted partner offering compassionate care and peace of mind for families when it matters most. To us, it's personal. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Danielle Duck. No relation to Donald Duck. I am the representative for Kiowa Curran. The medication that I represent is called Neuriance. Neuriance is a very exciting, different medication than any other Parkinson's medication. It's the first and only medication for Parkinson's that works on adenosine. Most medications work on dopamine. I'm not going to go into any more of that because it's very clinical, but most of you have my business card, I think, and you can call me and I can explain more of that. So let me tell you a little bit about Neuriance. Neuriance is indicated for off episodes for patients that are currently taking carbidopa, levodopa. So if a patient that's taking carbidopa, levodopa starts to experience off episodes, meaning it stops working, they're not moving the way they want to move. This is where Neuriance comes in. Neuriance will give the patient about 2.5 to 3 hours more of movement to move the way they want to move. What it looks like is fluidity. It's not going to be the medicine that's like the home run, like with levodopa, carbidopa. Like I said earlier, it's going to be smooth. This medicine comes in 2 doses, 20 milligrams and 40 milligrams. You can take it any time of the day. You can take it with food, without food, and there's no titration. So how do you get this medicine? You get this medicine through a specialty pharmacy. That's very important. There are 3 specialty pharmacies in Denver. There's one at St. Luke's. There's one down on Hamden Ave, 499 Hamden Ave, and then there's one down in Colorado Springs. Very, very important. This medicine you can get. There is support for Medicare, and for commercial patients, it's about $10. So it's a great medicine. So that's it. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Tina Gonzalez. I am with Lifeway Mobility, formerly Accessible Systems. We have been providing home modifications in the Colorado area for the past 25 years. We can provide anything from as small as a grab bar to as large as a bathroom remodel. We do stair lifts, ramps, vertical platform lifts, elevators, basically anything to help you stay at home safely and independently. If you're interested in something like this, we can do free home assessments where we will never try to sell you something, but always here to help provide a solution. Thank you so much for having us. Tina Gonzalez, Lifeway Mobility.
Okay, last but not least, I think I was last year too. But anyway, my name is Allison. I am with MERS Therapeutics. I know I have spoken to many of you. We have a couple of different products. So last year I was representing one. This year we've got 2 for the Parkinson's arena. One is Xeomin, which is a botulinum toxin. Sounds kind of scary, but if you're familiar with Botox, our drug is not going to make you prettier, no less wrinkles, but what we can do, hopefully, is stop some of the drooling. So sometimes with Parkinson's, drooling is one of the side effects of Parkinson's. It could also be a side effect of some of the medications that you take. It's a very simple injection done in a physician's office. A neurologist, movement disorder physician can do it. They inject 2 little glands every 4 months. And it helps to prevent some of that over salivation or drooling, as we might call it. We also recently acquired Inbrija, which, as you've heard a couple other people talk about, it is for those off episodes. So it's that return of symptoms that come unexpectedly. If the medication maybe is not working the way that it is supposed to do, your carbidopa, levodopa combination, or early in the morning, it works as quick as 10 minutes. It's an inhaler that you can take up to 3 times a day. So if you want some more information, I know I've spoken to a few of you, please don't hesitate to stop out there and I will be happy to explain anything I can to you. Thank you.
All right, once again, a big round of applause for all of our sponsors. So we provide these educational conferences not only through sponsorship of our wonderful partners, but also through your individual donations. You didn't think you'd get through lunch without an ask, did you? So there are donation slips on your table if you're able to make a donation. We know a lot of you donate regularly or donate during our annual campaign, and we so appreciate that. Because that helps us to continue to provide the free programs and services that we do to thousands impacted by Parkinson's in Colorado and Wyoming. So now with that, we are on to our final speaker of the day, Dr. Laura Swink. Dr. Swink is an occupational therapist and PhD-trained rehabilitation scientist. She completed her PhD at CSU and went on to do an advanced geriatric postdoctoral fellowship at the VA. She has focused her research work on novel rehabilitation interventions for people with chronic and progressive conditions, including community-based programming and techniques to promote self-management with various behaviors. Her passion is designing research programs for people with Parkinson's, and she has worked specifically on research related to Parkinson's on and off for the last 7 years. In August, she returned to CSU and is now faculty in the Department of Occupational Therapy. So put your hands together for Dr. Swink.
Hello. Thank you all for having me here. I'm glad someone moved the microphone down and I have this, so I'm not as tall as that other person. Let's see, how do I? Okay. So, yes, I'm Laura Swink, and today I'll be presenting on exploring loneliness, mobility, and quality of life for people with Parkinson's, a Parkinson Association of the Rockies metrics project. Jody already gave a great intro to me, so I don't have to do that anymore, but that's me. And then since I'm faculty now, I always have to kind of like set the expectation. So the first 10 minutes, we're going to be going through the metrics project and what that looked like with Parkinson Association of the Rockies. And then we'll go into loneliness and social prescription as a potential solution for some of what we've been seeing. And then hopefully some questions. I always have to do disclosures. I'm employed through Colorado State University, and I'm also still affiliated with the VA. So the views that I state do not necessarily reflect the views of the federal government. Oh, can you not hear me? Sorry. I have this one, but maybe, let me move my hair. Is that better? You know what's funny? I have a very naturally soft voice, and I'm sure this room can understand, but people are always asking me to speak up. Can you hear me okay now? Okay. So also any findings I present today are preliminary, and the social prescription work that I'll talk about is funded through the American Occupational Therapy Foundation. So moving into some of the preliminary results from the metrics project. Some of you may be familiar with this project. So this started in February 2022. So it's been going for about 2.5 years. And it's been initiated and implemented by staff at PAR. Delisa Novak did a lot of this work, and I'm sure a ton of other people that I cannot personally name. But basically, they've been going around to the community-based exercise classes for people with Parkinson's every 6 months and assessing mobility, 3 different mobility measures, and then also some self-report assessments that we'll talk about here as well. So the measures that they were doing in class, we had 3 different mobility assessments that they were looking at. For those of you that did participate, some of this will sound pretty familiar, but we had the timed up and go, the 10-meter walk test, and the 30-second sit to stand. So the timed up and go is a reliable test in people with Parkinson's, and it times the time that it takes to stand from a chair, walk 3 meters, turn, and sit back to the chair. The 10-meter walk test is also highly reliable and valid for assessing gait speed. And it is the time, it's actually like the meters per second walking 6 meters, ironically, because there's a ramp up and a cool down period. And the 30-second sit to stand is frequently used as a measure of functional mobility. It's the number of stands that someone can do in 30 seconds. And then we had self-report assessments that people were returning, either doing in class or returning, but we had some demographic and general health information, a functional independence measure called the Schwab in England, which has been correlated to other staging assessments for people with Parkinson's, like the Hone and Yahr. But it's just one question that is self-report. And then quality of life with the Parkinson's Disease Questionnaire 8. And this has one question for each of the following areas: mobility, activities of daily living, emotional well-being, stigma, social support, cognitions, communications, and bodily discomfort. And then we assessed loneliness with the 3-item loneliness scale. And this looks at scores ranging from 3 to 9, with higher scores being greater loneliness, and it's been used a lot with various populations. So I have a little bit of the baseline data here. So we had over 300 people who had completed those mobility assessments, but around 220 to 245 who returned most of like the self-report questionnaires. So some of the baseline demographics here: majority male, majority non-Hispanic, white, age averaging around 72 years, had been participating in group exercise classes for a little over 2 years, and averaging 5.5 years since diagnosis. So we have kind of fewer people at each assessment point because staff was going back to classes and it might not be the same people at each class. So I want to present some of the change data from the first 2 time points, where we have ranging from like 120 to 185 participants. And I will say that's a really great study for a community-based program like this to go out and actually get performance-based assessments. So it's huge. So what we saw, the timed up and go, that one where you stand from the chair, walk 3 meters, turn and sit down, there was an improvement on average of 0.35 seconds faster in those first 6 months. And that actually is a statistically significant improvement, which is great to see. I always have to say everything also in terms of clinical significance, but clinically, 3.5 seconds change is considered clinically meaningful as far as an improvement. So it's not necessarily a clinical improvement, but it was an improvement on that timed up and go, the seconds it took. The 10-meter walk test, no statistical change there, went from 1.25 meters per second to 1.29 meters per second, so about the same, very slight improvement. And then the 30-second sit to stand, there was an average decrease of about half a stand, which again was statistically significant as far as a decrease there, but not clinically. There are no cutoffs for people with Parkinson's specifically, but for older adults, about 2 stands is considered clinically meaningful. You always have to go back and kind of figure out how it was all assessed. I am told that in the beginning, they were letting people kind of bounce up and down a little bit more. And then in the second time point, people were really coming to a full sit and a full stand. So there's the potential that that is accounting for that like half a stand difference there. Functional independence on that Schwab in England scale stayed about the same. And then quality of life, lower is better here, was about the same, very, very slight improvement there. And loneliness, there was also a slight improvement, but we're going to talk about that a little bit more and what that really looks like. So I think it's always really hard to present something that has null results or no change, but no change is great news. So no change on these mobility outcomes is huge over 6 months. There are some other large studies of people with Parkinson's that have shown declines in quality of life on that same measure and functional mobility on that timed up and go measure steadily over 2 years. So I don't want to overspeak to it too much, but it's really showing that these group exercise classes are helping maintain functional mobility. And I think the big takeaway is, and that's across 6 months, and that's huge. So I think the big takeaway is do the exercise that you like to do where you can do it often, but it's working in this sample of people over 6 months. So that's really exciting. And then I was trying to show some of the timed up and go improvements there. If you look at the blue part, that's the 25th percentile to the 75th percentile. That chunk, it doesn't look like much change, but went down to, it took below 10 seconds to do that test. So that really is great to see. So loneliness, I said we were gonna start getting more into that area. In time point 1, we used a cutoff of 5 or more on this loneliness scale. In time point 1, we saw about 33% of people were scoring in the lonely range on this assessment. And at first glance, time point 2, I think it was like 29% of people were scoring in the lonely range, so that looks like a little bit of an improvement. But then when I went and was digging in the data a little bit more, some of the people who were lonely maybe didn't return questionnaires for the second time point. So I think we had some people cross the threshold in either direction. Some people crossed the threshold into the lonely range, other people into the not lonely range. But overall, it would probably even out if everyone had responded in the same way for the second time point. So we're looking at about a third of people scoring in the lonely range on this assessment. And that made us start thinking that what can we do? You know, what can we do to help address loneliness? And we know that maybe for a large group of people, the class is working to address loneliness, or people aren't feeling lonely, they're feeling connected. But for this other chunk of people, what can we do? So that is kind of moving us in the direction of loneliness and social prescription, which I'll start talking about more here. And then I always like to highlight that it's not just people with Parkinson's, it is everyone right now. The Surgeon General released a 2023 report called Our Epidemic of Loneliness, saying that about 50% of US adults are experiencing loneliness, and that social connection is a biological need. So, I mean, they were relating it to it's needed as much as we need like food and water. It can result in many negative health consequences. And in this report, so this was, you know, all of the US, 16% of people said they were attached to their communities. So that's a pretty small percentage to feel attached to your community. And it also said that older adults have the highest rates of isolation. But for anyone who's really interested in loneliness, like me, Gen Z also had the highest rates of loneliness. So older adults are actually more isolated, but Gen Z in the young adult population, it had about 60% were experiencing loneliness. So it's a problem that spans the generations. And it also says that people who are socially connected live longer, and there's lower risk for other serious health outcomes like heart disease, stroke, and diabetes. And then we won't talk about this direction as much, but there was a study released that talked about increased loneliness is correlated with increased risk of developing Parkinson's. So that really kind of brings it back to more of a public health need. They didn't say that it was causing Parkinson's, but increased loneliness, increased risk of developing Parkinson's in that study. And then I think after I said that report, everyone might be thinking like, well, then we're good. I mean, we're a lot lower than the average for loneliness. And I think that's true in some ways. One thing is that, you know, this was a sample of people participating in community-based group exercise classes. So we expect probably loneliness is a little bit lower. But in other studies for people with Parkinson's, reported rates of loneliness varied from around 24% to 54%. And in those studies, compared to people without Parkinson's, loneliness was higher for people with Parkinson's. And this can be due to a variety of symptoms that can impact social functioning, but facial masking is a big one, dysarthria, and then tremor and neuropsychiatric symptoms can all impact loneliness. And then those changes in participation in social functioning then impact social roles for people with Parkinson's. So we started to look into what we can do, and I had been talking a lot with Jody and also some of my colleagues at the University of Colorado, Corey Christensen, Mark Monago. What can we do for loneliness? What can we do for this 1/3 of people experiencing loneliness? And I started to look up different interventions. Oh, sorry, that was me. Different interventions that can help. And there are a lot of interventions out there that are evidence-based to decrease loneliness. Meditation and mindfulness, different interventions that focus on improving social skills, social cognitive training and addressing maladaptive social cognition, social support programs, more opportunities for social contact, interdisciplinary interventions in the community, and then one that I started to really latch on to is social prescription. So I think social prescription includes a lot of those other elements. It can include the increased social support. It can include interdisciplinary interventions in the community. And that is the direction that we decided to go. Is it the microphone? Oh, okay. Is it working? Okay, thanks. So what is social prescription? It's a method of connecting people to community resources to improve their health and well-being. And I always describe it as it started as a primary care physician writing on a prescription pad, go for a walk with a friend, and emphasizing that that is very important to address loneliness. And the infrastructure and availability varies in each country, each community. There's actually a ton of infrastructure in the UK for social prescription programs. And oftentimes they have link workers who assist in identifying social prescriptions and connecting people. So why am I doing this? What is occupational therapy? Sometimes I feel like people have a certain view of occupational therapy, but really it's the therapeutic use of everyday life occupations to enhance participation. And those are more broad than you might think. It's activities of daily living, so that's like the dressing, bathing, instrumental activities of daily living, like the driving, meal prep, laundry, but then more comprehensively, these other occupations, which are health management, rest and sleep, education, work, play, leisure, and social participation. So I really feel like we are one of the disciplines to be able to prescribe a social activity. And this program, oh wait, I did the top button. Can I go back? Okay. Before, okay. So this program is occupational therapy-led social prescription, and it has 3 parts, which is how it's typically done. Participant identification for the social prescription by a health professional or a community member. So either you all have flyers, so you could either call me if you're interested or want to see if you might be eligible, or PAR staff can see if you would be interested in having your information passed along. And then evaluation with an occupational therapist to co-design a social prescription. And it's not, I want to be clear that it's not getting just at extroverts, like it's not forcing people to do an activity that they wouldn't want to do. It's really trying to work within what would be meaningful to you, and it's very individualized. I go through an assessment that looks at 89 different activities before designing the social prescription. And then there's follow-up with an occupational therapist or occupational therapy doctoral student on the social prescription. So what got in the way of getting there, what helped you get there, how can we problem solve, how can we set goals. There's no magic pill to actually change behavior. So the follow-up and accountability is a large part of rehabilitation programs. So there are, according to one study, 11 different areas that you should identify what resources exist in your community in order to prescribe something socially. So these are the different areas: social technology, intergenerational interventions, conducive communities, non-human companions. And I've kind of compiled a list. This program is happening Denver to Fort Collins, of resources that exist in all of those areas as potential social prescriptions. And that study showed that if you do that, we can reduce loneliness through these types of programs. And then this is just that I'm enrolling for the study now. Again, it's funded by the American Occupational Therapy Foundation. It's funded by a grant called an Implementation Science Grant, which is focused on using programming that we know can be beneficial, like social prescription, and can we get it out to the community, and does it work in our communities? You can pre-screen with PAR staff or me, and we are including adults with a diagnosis of Parkinson's who score 5 or more on this loneliness assessment, have participated in an exercise class or support group in the last year, and agree to a 6-month program, and no diagnosis of dementia for this study. I think there's the flyer. I have a lot of references, and that's all I have. Any questions? I don't know if I have time for questions, but I got a 5-minute sign, yeah. Thank you.
Sorry, we don't have time for questions, but if you have any questions or follow-up for Laura, she'll be here for a little bit and can answer those, or you can talk to anybody on the PAR staff and we can get you connected. So